my sound. Stay consent to being live streamed. Got it.
Did you use your keyboard? Turn up to the center.
Okay. So I call this to order. Yeah, well. Yeah. Well, I'll actually start by calling the meeting to order. Welcome everyone to the Design Review Tree Board meeting of March 28th. Since we are a hybrid format still, or Zoom still, I'll read this notice. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California Executive Order N2920 dated March 17th, 2020 regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The live stream of the meeting will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. Members of the public wishing to speak to the DRB on any item listed on the agenda may do so during the discussion of each item. Each public comment is normally restricted to 3 minutes in length. It's due to this order, we are also allowing public comment to include those attending via Zoom. If you are joining from Zoom, please raise your hand on the app or your phone by dialing *9 during the public comment periods. You will then be unmuted for your public comment. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Also, if you've emailed your public comment prior to the meeting, these comments will be summarized for comments into the record. Please don't abuse this new way to provide public comments. So with that, we're good. People out there in the world can hear us. So let's do a roll call to start.
Lynn Diedler,
Here. Here.
Harry Bush,
Here.
Christine Lovell,
Here.
Vice Chair Melissa Hanley,
Here.
and Chair Lars Lingberg.
Here. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So we do have some minutes to approve from a previous meeting of September 7th, 2022, where we reviewed 2 facade improvement grants, and then we had 1 other project. So let's see, Ted, Lars, Marshall, Carrie, Melissa, Christine, we were all there. So anybody have any comments on those minutes? Questions, comments? Nope, no. Can I get a motion to approve? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
A motion, I have a second.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? We can go ahead and take a vote.
Carrie Bush,
Aye.
Lynn Diedler,
Abstain.
Christine Level,
Aye.
Vice Chair Melissa Hanley,
Aye.
and Chair Lars Langberg.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes unanimously 5-0 or 4-0, one abstention.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, so we'll move on to comments from the public on items not on the agenda. Anyone out there wishing to address the board on anything besides our one agenda item? Out here in the audience now, anybody online?
I did not see anyone online. And John, can you confirm if we received any comments unrelated to agenda items?
I did not receive any comments unrelated to agenda items today.
Great. All right, thank you. So then we can move on to our one agenda item for today, project at 771 and 773 First Street, a design review, tree removal and tree protection plan.
And Chair Langberg, can you ask for any statement of conflict of interest? I think we skipped that on the agenda.
Nope, I did. Sorry. Any statements of conflict of interest from the board? Nope, seeing none. Okay, we'll move along. So could we get a staff report then for our one item?
Yes, thank you. So the project being presented today is, oh, let me get the slides up on the screen so everybody can see that. The project being presented today is for 771, 773 First Street. The request is design review approval, and the applicant is Thrive Construction with Steve and Rose Schock being the owners. Next slide, please. So a quick project introduction. The applicant is seeking design review, tree removal, and tree protection plan to construct a single-family dwelling and accessory dwelling unit at 771 First Street. This project is subject to design review as it is a new residential subdivision of 3 or more units per section 17.450.101A2 of the Sebastopol Municipal Code. Next slide, please. A quick project description is the proposed residence is 3,977 square feet of single-family house, which includes a 1,288 square foot garage. As mentioned earlier, there's also a 808 square foot accessory dwelling unit with a 301 square foot garage that's attached to that unit. There are a total of 16 total site trees. Per the provided tree protection plans in the staff report, trees 4, 12, 13, 15, and 16 are recommended for removal. And project history. This application was submitted in May of 2021. The first design review board meeting was held on August 18th of 2021. The design review board had a follow-up discussion for this project on January 5th of 2022. And at this meeting, the design review board provided staff and the applicant with direction on how to best interpret mitigation measure 8 from the approved resolution number 5220 as it related to discussion on what general area meant and discussion on home size in relation to that resolution. Staff and the city arborist met with the applicant through 2022, and a second submittal was provided to the planning department on December 15th of 2022. And next slide, please. Okay, thank you. At the August 18th meeting, the design review board provided direction to the applicant about grading, design of the structure, and overall mass, and the appropriate tree mitigation measures as follows. The board did not feel it was appropriate to remove tree number 5, a multi-trunk heritage oak, requested that the applicant revise the design of the home and its structure to retain tree number 5 and minimize the impacts on that tree. Reduce the overall grading and offall, and review and reduce overall unconditioned square footage and massing. The DRB also discussed the requirements around resolution 5220 and requested staff schedule a subsequent meeting to focus only on the interpretation of that resolution, which included the general area and how to best determine the appropriate size of the home. That subsequent meeting was held on January 5th of 2022, and the DRB tasked staff to provide input on the appropriate size of the home as it related to that mitigation measure 8 of the approved subdivision resolution. At this meeting, staff outlined 2 potential options for the DRB's consideration regarding general area and appropriate size of the home. For general area, the DRB felt that from the project site of 600 feet, which is the mailed notice area, was an appropriate interpretation of that, along with recent construction, meaning that homes were built within the last 20 to 30 years. Item number 2, staff suggested some options for the DRB to consider while looking at the average of those defined homes and allowing a 120 to 150% overage in square footage. The average of those homes was 2,440 in the general area, and 125% of that would have been 3,050 square feet. The DRB recommended 125% to the applicant. And I do want to note that while the DRB framed the recommendation as a motion, staff and city's legal counsel determined that that was not a binding motion. And as part of the revised submittal, staff had several on-site conversations with the applicant regarding home size, site grading, and tree protection. Since that meeting, the applicant has revised their plans to remove grading work from the large multi-trunk tree number 5, which opens the bottom wall and creates open space around that tree. If you see the note below, you can see the planted area is where that cutout was made to preserve the majority of tree number 5. And this is a chart that shows some of the changes to the project from the first submission and second submission. So as you can see in the house footprint, there's a reduction of 1,300 square feet. There is a reduction of 544 square feet of conditioned space. There is a reduction of 804 square feet of unconditioned space, including garages. And there are grading reductions in the cut. However, there is an increase in the fill on the site. The other thing that has come up is the proposed driveway located within the Calder Creek setback. And per section 17-100-060 of the Sebastopol Municipal Code, a minimum setback of 30 feet from the top of bank shall be provided for any buildings, mobile homes, garages, swimming pools, storage tanks, parking spaces, driveways, decks more than 30 inches above natural grade from the adjacent Zimpher Creek, Calder Creek, or Atascadero Creek, as this project is neighboring the Calder Creek. The Planning Commission will be reviewing a variance regarding this aspect on their agendized April 11th, 2023 meeting. I do want to note that the Design Review Board would not be the acting body on that variance, and that should not be a part of their review today. And last slide, as part of the conditions of approval, within the packet, there are some modifications from the December 15th application, and those are modified as the spa shall be eliminated from the project, removing proposed building and grading activities from the 20-foot setback area. Landscaping shall include a minimum of 1 24-inch box tree and 2 15-gallon trees for each protected tree removed as required by mitigation measure 7 of the approved subdivision resolution. And additionally, should the design review board approve this project, it shall be contingent on the approval of a variance to allow the driveway and parking spaces located within the creek setback by the Planning Commission. And I'm asking the design review board, should they approve this project, please add this condition that this approval shall not be valid unless and until the variance is approved by the planning commission.
And I
That-
think, just to clarify, the conditions that are bulleted under number 1, the spa has been eliminated, I believe. We are still recommending that proposed grading within the area also be removed, and that's on recommendation from our arborist, given the proximity to the trees. And then obviously the landscape measure is per the subdivision requirements. And so those are the recommended, staff recommended conditions.
Great, thank you for that report, John. Carrie, could you refresh my memory with the applicant is next and then the public
So if the board has any questions of staff,
of staff?
now would be the
correct,
good
okay,
time, and we
correct.
do have our city arborist, Becky Duckles, here as well for
Yeah,
that.
Okay,
And then we'll move to applicant presentation.
Yeah.
correct?
exactly. Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board to staff? Christine, go ahead.
Regarding this variance, I'm having trouble understanding why at this late hour, there's a variance being applied for. Shouldn't that have been done at the beginning of the project?
So, and we do have our city attorney here, but I will start off and then ask Larry to add any notes to this. But the original, and again, the variance is not in the DRB's purview. So you should not be considering, and we can't discuss pros and cons or anything like that of the variance because it's not part of your purview. It's not noticed on the meeting. And that would not be fair to anyone who is not here because they're interested in the variance. In terms of the variance, the subdivision was approved by the city council in 2002, which in essence requires the driveway to be within the creek setback. Planning staff felt that was all that was needed. When it was brought to our attention, I spoke with their city attorney and he said, yes, it is, even though it's clear what the city council's intent is. A variance was not granted at that time, so you should do that now, or you should bring that to the planning commission now. And so we are in the process of processing that, and that will be heard by the planning commission on April 11th. And so in terms of the DRB's actions today, again, you don't need to, I mean, I understand the question and I'm happy to answer that, Christine, but in terms of your consideration of this project, it is limited to the design review and the subdivision resolution as what is within your purview.
I'm still having a little bit of trouble understanding how there could be an assumption based on the project that there would be a variance required for a driveway through the entire, basically the entire creek setback. I mean, why would the city council assume that? The setback is clearly noted on the approved document.
And I'm gonna ask our city attorney has his hand raised, so I'm gonna let him go ahead and respond to that.
Thank you. Staff, I'll just note that I was not allowed to turn my video on or unmute myself, so you might ask whoever the technician is to correct that. No, it's just as the planning director said, because of the city council action back in 2002 in creating the subdivision, they placed the driveway basically within the creek setback, and that would, we believe, require a variance. But as the planning director also stated, that is not on the design review board agenda for today. It is not within the purview or jurisdiction of the design review board. It is a matter that is coming before the planning commission. So since it's not agendized today, I would recommend the design review board not discuss the variance issue.
Okay, I would just like to make one more point, though. Like one possible option for the driveway ends at lot 3, so it could just turn up and not encompass the whole entire property line there along the setback. And that could be something that could be decided by the planning commission And so I feel a little bit again that we've got the cart in front of the horse because that would change the design of the building and what design review board. I'm happy to not discuss. I'm just bringing these points forward that, there's a lot of issues with a creek setback. There's a reason why creek setbacks exist. They're universal. The Sebastopol Creek setback is typical everywhere. And so I don't think it's just an obvious, oh, they're just going to grant it. Seems to me. And they may, like say, you just turn up and just minimize the intrusion on the creek setback, which would change the design of the building. That's why in my experience, when I'm doing, projects, I get this stuff resolved before I design the project. So
to that, and I'll certainly defer to Larry if he disagrees with me on this, but it is very, staff believes that the intent is for, and I will show this screen real quick of what the city council actually approved in terms of this lot, which was that the entire, the building envelope. So what they required was that any structures were limited to the building envelope, which is about 5 feet from the property line where, Christine, you're saying a driveway could be. And then they specifically said no building outside of that. And obviously, even on this lot, even if you were to do that, you would actually end up with the driveway within the creek setback anyway on this lot. Because, obviously if it's, let me see if I can just, to outline where that is. This is the alignment of the driveway, so it would have to come in at this location. Again, you'd have to make some sort of sharp turn or something, but it would conflict with what was designated as the building envelope by the city council at the time. And again, this is not to get into discussion of the variance at this time, but that is just so that you can all see what the city council approved at the time.
But Carrie, I'd caution the design review board against further discussion of this issue. Again, it's not on this agenda. Anybody interested in this issue would not know that this would be discussed today. It's on the Planning Commission's agenda, so I would recommend no further discussion take place on this issue.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
fascinating.
I think it's clearly an important issue, which is why Christine's bringing it up. It will be addressed by a different body. So we can, let's.
Yeah,
move.
and I can note a contingent approval. The city has done many, many times in the past. So this is not an unusual thing where there's two different components needed by an application and one body has to go first. I mean, the planning, the other body could say, well, we want to know what the design review here board wants, and then you're never going to get to a decision. So you have to pick one body. And since this body is clearly already familiar with that, your hearing is today and theirs will be on April 11th. So this would just be contingent on it being approved at the planning commission level as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff, Christine?
I want to clarify one thing because it's going to come up later and something I'm going to mention. The January 5th, 2022 meeting was the exclusive purpose of that meeting was to provide some guidance on the M8. There was no intent in that meeting to review any specific project documents.
Correct.
That's
Yes,
correct.
there was not a second submittal. That meeting was held to provide a direction to both staff and the applicant at that time.
Right.
Correct.
And again, there was no intent in that meeting to review project documents.
Correct.
Okay.
There were no project documents as part of that meeting. It was simply about the subdivision resolution and how the applicant might move forward. And as John noted, that is not binding on the DRB. I know it was in the form of a motion, but that was not a valid motion other than to see if there was consensus among the DRB.
So our purpose there was to provide guidance and interpretation.
Correct. It was noticed and conducted as a study session, not as a hearing or formal meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Good for now. Anyone else have questions of staff? Down there, Lynn?
No.
Okay. Okay, then let's move to any presentation from our applicant, Gregory.
No, so if you could, yeah, we're ready for you. If you can go up to the dais to speak, that'd be great. And do you need to share your screen at all, Greg?
Was that did I just get beamed up? I'm beamed up? Okay. It wasn't just Carrie with a C that was messing around with that. Okay. First of all, I'm really glad we're meeting in person. Thank you for making the Zoom stuff work, but that was no fun. And I think really took away from the fact that we're all human beings, bringing our best efforts here, trying to do the right thing. And when we're all on screens and with, I guess with mics, I'm not that much better. So what we're looking for today is a decision. As I listed and John's already gone through, this has been going on. I've been working with Rose and Steve for more than 3 years now on this. With the design review, it's more than 2 years now. We've been through 3 associate planners that all had different takes and styles on this. We've had 5 design review board meetings, some of which kind of happened and didn't happen. And there's a change of design review board members as well. We believe that the plans as submitted and with the month to look at things, I'm hoping really do speak for themselves. But I want to address and get into just kind of pointing out some highlights here, as well as addressing some neighbor comments as well. So the highlights I'd like to address are part of the written statement. This property is one of the largest lots in the city of Sebastopol, residential lots. It is in a unique location where First Street environment setting homes are so different from what you find on Jewel and in that intersection. And then in Swain Woods, there's just a lot of diversity there. So matching one or the other isn't really an option for one size fits all, as well as for size and scale. I think we've all learned now that 2 and 3 car garages, if you've looked at everything, are actually not that unusual in this neighborhood, for example. I think that also, just to clarify with some neighbors as well, is, there are entitlements that as a property owner have when a subdivision is approved of, meaning building a house within a building envelope. And I know we would like to have open space. We all do in the environment, but I think we have to understand the legal facts here. I also want to make clear that Rose and Steve never wanted to remove tree number 5, which it's more than just a number to you guys, Olson's especially. And whether they own it outright or not, they respect and appreciate how important it is to you guys. And that's why we've made significant changes to the design, following direction from Becky Duckles as well to preserve the tree. John's already, I won't repeat, listed many of the changes, a lot of reductions that we've made. And I'll get into, excuse me. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, especially for the new design review board members that weren't here at the beginning. I heard, Melissa, you say that you went back even and watched some of the videos. I think you used the word colorful to describe, and you would be right with that. This is a project that our team worked very closely with planning and our clients to come up with what we eventually submitted. And throughout that whole process, and this is maybe an overgeneralization, but we're designing a house. We kept saying this is just a house, and a house that you can't even see from a public road. And when we all showed up to that first meeting, planning, myself, I'm sure the board did not expect the torches and pitchforks. And that really caught me off guard, everybody off guard. And, to me, there is, and I'm sorry to say this is tough, but this submittal was gaslit to the nth degree. And there were a lot of people that were uninformed, don't understand the facts of things, but we know that a neighbor or a couple went door to door, Skyfall, freaking everybody out, and without really knowing and understanding what was going on. And I think we were so in shock by that, that we just could tell that nobody was able to listen to anything. I didn't even present the project. I just said, you know what? I asked for a continuance because I'm like, what is going on here? I was just totally surprised. At that time, so I was informed that somebody went door to door. I believe it was Celadores that went door to door, letting everybody know that this was happening, and didn't at the time. They didn't even live in their house. They just bought the house and they hadn't even moved into it yet, where our clients have owned this house for decades. So this is, and so to me, that's the definition and continues to be the definition of NIMBYism. I'm sorry. And I'm really sorry to say that, but it is. And I know you guys know each other for a long time. You'll have your time. So it's really sad. And I'll get to Ken Jacobs in a little bit. I was hoping he was here. And what I want to say is, Olson's, I am so sorry you're caught in the middle of this, because I think you guys are the nicest people. And I enjoyed meeting you from the backyard and playing with your grandkids over the fence on the deck. And I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. And I actually think you, Rose and Steve, hopefully, if we can get through this, would actually be really great neighbors. And friends. But speaking of this, it got brought up by, the fence versus the property line. They're taking their backyard. And Christine, I know, got really elevated about that. And I got to look into this. But it's pretty common for a fence to not be built where a property line is. That's not uncommon. And I think we actually even talked about it at the back fence prior to then with the Olsons. The boundary tree, I already brought that up. 2-car versus 3-car garage, how common it is in the neighborhood, which nobody seemed to know at the time. We know that now. We spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of man hours to do an extensive review of the neighborhood statistics, which I think is not reasonable or fair for a single family home, somebody who wants to build their own single family home to have to do, but we did it. The driveway, which I'm going to talk about not in context of what's already been started because it's not part of this meeting, but there was a lot of effort before the first submittal and since on property orientation, orientation of the building, the driveway orientation, all of those different things. And in the city guidelines, it talks a lot about headlights facing into other people's property and things like that when you're driving, and keeping the garage under the house actually in our studies reduced massing because it didn't require another structure on the side of the building or a detached structure. And in order to do that, the house only needed to be about 3 feet higher than if it was a single level home because of the high elevation line at the back of the property. So the difference between a single level home as this first story as you see it and a 2-story home with a garage underneath it in usable space is 3 feet of height. That's the difference. Rose and Steve and our team did not look to build a large house. That happened through the process of design. When we realized we're putting the garage underneath, the storage for all of your Christmas decorations, whatever else, which they don't have in their current home, they can make room for. Okay, let's do that. Let's put that under there. When we learned that, you know, the root structure of trees are really these oaks in particular, the majority of them are within the top couple feet of soil, that whether you dig a footing down deeper or not does not greatly affect, and Becky can speak to this directly, the trees. So digging a normal footing versus a retaining wall with livable space in there has little to no impact on tree roots of the oaks. That's the way I understand it. It's probably not that black and white issue. And I'd like to hear what Becky has to say about that. Flooding, once again, the neighbor upstream, their last property flooded because of something that happened. So therefore, this project is going to flood building a house there. And it's even got brought up again with neighbor comments. And I think what people are forgetting is that there's a large part of Calder Creek that is underneath the street in a pipe. Okay. And this is a section with an approved upon subdivision that has setbacks. That all stuff is going to be dealt with otherwise, but this is not going to cause Sebastopol to flood. There was also, even early on, a concern about the beige coloring of the house. I think planning had a comment about that. We did a survey. I think between 60 and 70% of the homes in the area are some degree of beige. So we had to debate on what size meant, whether that was conditioned square footage or not. And then we came to that conclusion that it was conditioned square footage. We also talked about the fact that there is no database available for any type of square footage numbers for non-conditioned square footage. So how do we compare what is unconditioned or non-conditioned? And honestly, I don't understand why and how we got to the point where it feels like garage and storage is somehow bad and we shouldn't have so much of it. Even if it's underneath a house where you can't even, it wouldn't impact the massing or the perimeter of the house to any neighbors. Has anybody driven or walked down Litchfield recently? There are 2 new houses being built on Litchfield. One went through design review and one didn't. The one on the corner of Fellers and Litchfield is actually in this submittal. There's a 3-car garage on that one as well. It is from corner to corner and it's soon on the market spec house. And it is looks like it's towering over the house next to it. That is what happens when you don't have to go through design review and what anybody else could do to their homes, and design review and planning couldn't do anything about it. Just up the street at 911 Litchfield, it did go through design review. And the meeting minutes for that only took 3 pages for me to read through them. And the questions were, what's the railing material going to be? Oh, I have a concern about where guests are going to park. And there was a drainage question. Okay, it's approved. Has anybody driven by and seen this house? It is towering over the street. And we're so obsessed with numbers that don't necessarily impact, the community for this project. This is why this has gotten so out of context and so out of hand. This house won't even be able to be mostly, if at all, seen from a public street. It's been designed downhill intentionally to minimize the impact. We did a study before the original submittal about view heights off of especially the Olson's 2 levels of decks. And to make sure that we could minimize, that's why we didn't have any roof angles going towards that side, all those things. But what I want to really hone in on is, and I think where my client's frustration and my frustration is that I feel like neighbors' complaints have had more influence here than the submittals. And that really concerns me because many of them are not rooted in fact or in law or anything else. And it really undermines and makes us sound, it's really made us sound like we're trying to pull one over on you guys. And that's never been the case. So that's where I get into, and this is very important to talk about Ken Jacobs' latest letter. I actually had our attorney that's involved with this project, as well as another attorney look at this, and both of them had a similar response, which was you don't need an attorney to respond to this because it doesn't even like come close to like requiring that level of position to undermine this. This is where I have to say that, Ken says in his first sentence and his last sentence, I really want Rose and Steve to have a house there. But everything else he does and doesn't do, and including the public records research he's doing right now on more stuff to stop the driveway and everything else, he's going at every length possible. And he's getting everybody riled up to undermine this. And it's cruel. It's cruel. We've given plenty of opportunities. I tried to meet with the Olsons and the Saladoris individually, and Ken wouldn't allow it. It had to be on his terms, and all of them had to be together. It's completely intentionally undermining and trying to control the narrative in the situation. What he writes in this latest letter is completely misleading and hypocritical. He uses phrases like must be denied and violates and what else? Twisted interpretation. And you guys must be outraged. Because what I've always heard from legal professors and maybe watching a little too much TV is if you can't win on the merits, attack the people or what's the right phrase I'm looking for? Get people upset, basically. And that's what he's doing right here. He wants you guys to be upset like we're trying to pull something over on you. The hypocrisy here, though, and he made a very clear interpretation or a response to an earlier comment I made about him being one of the biggest opponents of the subdivision from beginning. And he made a clarification to say it was actually about the Hayden extension. And what's really interesting about that is that he has benefited more from that Hayden extension not being done than anybody else. And I'd even say solely benefited from it. He's put up his own fence around that property. The city owns it. There's no permission for him to do that. He's put raised bed planters on it and irrigation. He parks a truck on it. He's planted trees, which I'm sure are on the heritage tree list, right along the sidewalk to make sure that hopefully they grow big enough before anybody wants to do anything with it. So there's a situation here where this and early on when we were trying to figure out M8, it was suggested that Ken help us interpret M8. I can't believe he is so biased and so motivated to obstruct everything possible with this project that it's just unbelievable. And it's just, I can't believe that I live a few blocks from this person, and it just really upsets me that he could treat somebody like this. Because these are human beings that have owned this property for decades, that are coming home. They thought they were coming home. They want to come home. Even on the second page of his letter, he shows a very close-up snip of the driveway thing, which we're not supposed to talk about. But he does it so perfectly that it doesn't show that the rest of the driveway is already in that setback that's installed and some other information that might kind of undermine his point. I hope all of you read the letter from the outside counsel in response to our letter about our when we appealed, or we could not appeal, but submitted for an appeal, and can find for yourself that Ken's argument, and that's what it is, an argument, not fact, is completely off base and inaccurate. He tries to make it seem like that the only reason that the recommendations you made were not binding is because it wasn't a final action. If you read that document, that is in one sentence at the end, and everything else is about why it's non-binding and why it's guidelines, and that the applicant can choose to follow that or not. But Ken doesn't show that in here because he doesn't want you to be thinking about that. He wants you to be, what's the word? Outraged. So be outraged. He also claims that we take that all of our information and arguments are taken out of context. And once again, the hypocrisy is just ripe with that. Yes. How much?
We normally give applicants about 10 minutes, so
Okay.
if you could be cognizant of that.
Okay. In the past, you've given me a little bit more because of the extent of this
I
one.
understand, but just as a
Okay.
time check.
Thank you. I'm most of the way through. Okay. And actually, I think John's already pointed out a lot of what I'm pretty close. So to that end, and out of respect for your request, I'd just like to say that there is so much baggage with this project, and so much of it is what I believe to be inappropriate and unfair to Rose and Steve. They just want to build a house, and they gave out an invite. They sent out a mailer. They didn't have to neighbors to come ask questions, have any concerns met. And you know what? The people that did respond, and people did, had their questions answered and their concerns met. And we've never seen them in here. But those that have never taken them up on the offer are the ones that keep coming here. So I want you guys, I'd like to ask the board to try to sift through the noise of what I think is textbook NIMBYism and gaslighting. And can we finally talk about the project for the first time in 2 years and 5 meetings? That's my ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Can I
Hey,
have a question of the applicant? Are we going to do that?
yes, we are. Before you sit down, but thank you for your presentation, first of all, and questions from the board for the applicant, Christine.
I just want to comment that the design review board's interaction with this project was a meeting in August of 2021. And in that meeting, we discussed some general aspects to the project, and the concern for the M8 came up. And then the second meeting that we had was January 22nd, 2022. And that was to discuss the M8. Which we had a discussion that lasted for quite a long time, and agreed to the guidance of the average square footage plus 125%. You know, we had a specific thing. And then we did not see this project again, these plans, until February 23rd, 2023. So while there's all this discussion about all this stuff that happened, this is what I know about the project. And you know, neighbors fighting with each other. What's relevant to me is what our task is as design review board members, which was an initial preliminary review, a discussion of M8, and now we're here. So I don't feel that the board had anything to do with this, all this activity going on, which you just described. And
Is there a question?
well,
there?
I'm
Okay.
making a comment here because
okay.
it was all these meetings and all this time, but actually it wasn't for us. We've just had, this is the third meeting on this project. And the second meeting wasn't really about the project per se, to discuss the design. So we really haven't even had an opportunity. So we're not delaying discussing the design. We haven't even had an opportunity to do that really. And I just want to be clear about that.
Okay,
And
may I
all
respond?
This neighbor drama is really not interesting to me personally. I don't know how my board members feel. I mean, it's public comment and we should take it in, but
Okay, so
Public comment.
I don't want to have a debate
Yeah,
here.
well, I
think
thought it was a
that's how
question.
It wasn't a question.
Okay.
So thank you for your comment, but I think comments for the project or the process happen in deliberation or further in our process. So are there any questions for the applicant about his presentation or about the project from the board? Carrie?
So I was going to ask, how is stormwater mitigated and also detained prior to creek discharge?
My understanding about that is if it's not in what was submitted with the LACO plans, that is part of a because I believe we talked with planning about that is something that needs to get addressed before permit can be issued. So we haven't done calculations, or I don't know if what specifics or what part you're talking about. Is there a specific part you're asking about?
Well, yeah, on page C 2.0.
Okay.
There's some daylighting of pipes. And
Okay.
it's discharged directly to the creek. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, how is it mitigated prior to that
Oh.
discharge? How do you just, not pour turpentine down the drain and they go right to the creek?
Interesting. I don't have an answer for that.
Also, just curious, are the water, sewer, and power lines in the creek setback?
I don't know if the existing, well, there's existing there that run with the driveway. There's already
Yeah, so I can actually
Thank
share
you.
my screen on this one. Which shows the plan. There are utilities, water and I believe sewer are already underneath the driveway area. Utilities are allowed by our code within the creek setback. So again, we're not dealing with variances, but just so you know, those are allowed. And they are shown on that sheet C3, which you just mentioned, Member Bush. It does look like the water continues along. I could probably highlight it for folks just so everyone can see. So the water is coming there, which is within, there's the property line where my line just stopped. And then it is coming up and going in. And then obviously it needs to go over to the ADU. So it's heading over that way. And then the sewer line is, coming down that way, basically underneath where the driveway would be.
My last question might be, is solar required for this project to be built on a new home?
I believe it is.
Yes, that
Yeah.
is part of the building code.
Okay. And would that be roof mount?
It would be.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Carrie. Lynn, any questions of the applicant? Okay, this is your chance to ask the applicant question. Okay. Melissa?
I was just curious, you provided a really comprehensive survey of homes in around perhaps the entire city of Sebastopol included in this list. And if you kind of came to any sort of singular understandings about the data set.
Thank you for asking that, actually. So the data we collected is within the areas that we listed, Swain Woods, all those, is that they're consistently inconsistent. And that was, like I mentioned earlier, is that not far from this property, some of the smallest homes on the smallest properties that actually have highest FAR to those properties are next to some of the largest properties with larger homes, but lower FAR. But what was very interesting was comparing First Street to Hayden Jewell area, of just them being like Mars and Venus, like they're just so different. But to me, I actually, there were questions and concerns about this being a a standout or the one house that was as large as this. And what we found is that actually there's a lot of 3-car garages and 2-car garages and outbuildings and barns. But what we also found is that there's actually a lot of inconsistency with the information that's available publicly. It doesn't track necessarily additions and things like that either. So I just think that for what is available to the public, this is as thorough as we could get. And to go further beyond that, we would have to knock on neighbors' houses and they'd have to allow us to come in to measure it. I also really, to the point of the unconditioned square footage, is once again, how it felt so impossible to determine how much one house to the next did. One of the homes that we brought up, I didn't bring up today, but 400 Swain Avenue, which is a 4,999 square foot house. Nobody in our neighborhood knew that. And it's set down from the road. It looks like a story and a half from above, very similar to what the east side of the Shocks house would be. And from Jewel down below, you can't even see it because there's trees and vegetation, just like the Shocks house. So I think that's the context that I think is really interesting when we did this survey, and then comparing it to the house on Litchfield that had small numbers, but huge presence. So does that answer your question?
It did, yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I sort of sifted through some of your data myself and ran some averages through it, and I think that answers my question for now. Thank you. I was also curious if the Shocks looked at a larger ADU.
If they looked at a larger ADU,
I mean, you can have 1,000 square feet.
sure. Well, I think that what they were able to accomplish was 2 bedrooms, which was their goal, but was also not wanting to take up more lot coverage than what they already did. They wanted to make sure there was laundry, but they were able to do that in the garage. So I don't think there was any desire to go larger with the ADU.
Shifting some program from one of the masses to the other, sort of.
Well, okay, I'm glad you just said that. When we explored before the first submittal and since, but mostly since, the closest front runner to changing the overall program would make the main house a single level home,
Okay.
which would, like I said, be exactly what it is, but 3 feet lower. And we would put the garages underneath the ADU. And that way it wouldn't increase, but then you would have a much larger house or structure there. And for us, in all of the studies we did, we found that putting things underneath the main house actually had the least amount of impact on what we perceived the different directions of sight and what it would be on the neighbors, or if you could even see it from a public street.
Thank you. And then the materials that have been selected for the exterior, a lot of non-Indigenous stone materials. Any look to things that are more locally sourced?
I think that's an option. We'd be open to that.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all for me.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Any other questions for the applicant? No? Thanks, Gregory.
Thank you.
So we'll move to public comment. There's 6 people in the room. I'm not sure if you all want to speak, but I don't know if we also have people waiting online on Zoom.
So how we are handling public comment with this hybrid setup is if you would like to make a comment, if you could go stand in line, you'll be at right where Greg was to make your public comment. So go stand by that microphone, and we will call on one person from in the room. And then if we have someone from the Zoom folks who want to comment, we'll go to them and we'll just alternate back and forth.
Okay,
And I do have a 3-minute timer. If you'd like a 30-second warning, I'm happy to do that. And I do see we have at least one Zoom commenter.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have 3 minutes for public comment, and please state your name and address if you would.
My name's Paul Schlock. I'm here representing Steve and Rose. Just to give you a background, our children were all, although this doesn't really have anything to do with the house or anything, but it just kind of gives you a background of our family. we're all born here in Sebastopol, all went to the schools here. And then eventually went away from Sebastopol in different places. But they all recognized the fact that Sebastopol is a pretty nice place to live. And they had, this property was in their hands, I think 2021. And in 20, around 2000. Around 2000. So it was around 2000, 2001 probably. And then 2002, they subdivided the property into the 3 lots that we're now discussing. And they worked out between themselves the ownership of the lots. So my daughter Lisa has the lot next to Steve's, and then my son Tom has the next lot. So it's all in the family. So they had this desire that maybe they would come back and retire here in Sebastopol. So that's really what the background is. And Steve and Rose are the first of the children that wanted to come back and build. And I'm here representing them, and I can give you any, the background of the subdivision if you want, or things of that type, and ask any questions. But we're here really looking for a favorable decision from the Design Review Board to approve the project. However, if you feel that you can't approve the project, we need to have a decision. It's got to be either approval or denial, because they have been dragging on, as Greg is, very well presented, for what, 3-4 years. And it's just to the point where they need a decision to move ahead or not. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, and would hope that you would approve the project so that they could proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think we won't have questions, but to know you're a resource in the crowd, we might have to turn to you. So thank you for now.
Okay.
So I guess we have a Zoom commenter.
Sure. And so the next commenter is Stephen Fabian and Judy McCann. Is it Stephen? I am assuming you're Stephen. There. Oh, we just lost him.
Yeah, can you unmute yourself, Stephen?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this hearing. I'm not here to gaslight anyone, and I'm not here to be a NIMBY. I hope the shots, in fact, get their house. But my understanding is that when this subdivision was approved, there was a limit set on how big each house could be, and they should not exceed the average amount, which turns out to be 2,400 square feet. And I'm not sure how all of a sudden not exceeding what the neighborhood should be became 125% of what the neighborhood should be. It's, the house that they build and live in should be the house that fits the requirements that they agreed to, the family agreed to when this subdivision was made. And that's all what we're asking for. And as for saying that this house not be able to be viewed from the street level, it will be seen by people on First Street. It maybe not be seen, maybe it's low enough so it won't be seen on Jewel, but definitely will be visible from our house and from the street on First Street, this is a First Street address. And so all we're asking, at least, is that this house be one that doesn't exceed the limits that were agreed to when the subdivision happened. And I think right now this house is way beyond that. It seems to me if 2,400 square feet is the neighborhood that this house is being built in, then even at 125%, that's 3,000 square feet, and this is beyond that also. So it seems to me we're exceeding the gift that they should not be given because it's beyond the agreement that was made. And on top of that, they're exceeding the 125%. So it's even beyond what the design review board seemed to think is appropriate, even though I don't understand the legal basis for going beyond the agreements that were entered into by the Schacht family at the time of this subdivision was made. So that's my comment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Stephen. So we'll move back here. Public comment, if you could state
Right
your
here.
name.
Can you? Hi, I'm Dale Jewell. I live on Jewell Avenue. I've known the Schacht family for a really long time. I've been their pharmacist at Pease Pharmacy since Stephen was a little boy, and I'm delighted to have them as neighbors. I really am. My main concern is that the trees and the creek are protected. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. It's a lovely place to build a house. I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure that the house isn't too big and impinging on the natural resources that are there. We did go from door to door talking to neighbors because the original plan was bigger and it did imperil the trees. And I'm really glad that we were able to talk to everybody about that. And Becky came out, I think, and took a look, and there were some changes made to the plans to protect the trees. I'd like your opinion to know if it's okay now, the way it stands. I think that's a really good question to ask you. But as far as I'm concerned, if the house doesn't imperil the trees in the creek, we're fine. I'm okay with it. I just want it to be reasonable. I mean, you keep saying it's just a house. It's a really, really big house. And also we owned the house before we moved in. So just so you know that. But anyway, so those are my concerns. I'm really glad the house is low the way you've designed it. I appreciate there's some things about the house I really appreciate. And that's what I care about, is just, it's beautiful there. And I want to make sure that the creek is protected, that it's not going to overflow. It's, everything's safe and good for everybody. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we have,
Do we have another online?
we do have another
Oh,
online,
okay.
Laura Burke. Laura, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and if you're able to show your video as well, that'd be great.
Okay. Hi, can you see me? Start my video.
Yeah, we can hear you. And now we can see you.
Oh, I'm kind of dark, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Laura.
So I just wanted to say that my issue is the same as the other two speakers, that the agreement was for 2,400 square feet. Even at 3,000 square feet, you just can't, you just feel like, I find it so unnerving that you feel like the rules just don't apply to you. It makes me really sad. It's like, why can't you live in a 3,000 square foot footprint? All of your neighbors do. That was the agreement for this subdivision. And I really, that's what a lot of the blowback to the building of this property has been. So that's my only comment. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And we'll go back to the room. Could you please state your name? You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Paul Olson, and my wife Lori and I live at 810 Jewell Avenue, which is on the eastern boundary. Many of my comments that I prepared are been voiced by some of the board members and other members of the audience. My first issue is obviously the size. We started off at a total mass conditioned unconditioned of over 6,500 square feet. I appreciate Greg and the Schachts reducing the footing of the structure and reducing the size so that it saves the trees on the eastern boundary. Those trees are important to us, but they're also important to the shocks. They're a natural buffer in the wintertime, the wind, the sun, and they beautify the neighborhood. The Design Review Board met on January 5th and laid out guidance. It wasn't a motion, but guidance that it would be the average of more recent homes within 600, 650 feet from the building site. And their staff report and the Design Review Board came up with 2,440 feet times 125%, which is about 3,000. If they decided to use 150%, it would be 3,600. The house came in at 3,977, which is almost 4,000. So blew right back then. So whatever recommendation was kind of ignored. As far as the creek setback, you have a Muni code that requires 30 feet setback from creek. That's established to protect the creeks. It seems like it was ignored when I looked at the plans of the most recent development. The driveway goes right over that and inside impinges on the creek setback. A variance has been applied for. Carrie, I don't know the date of that application. You can give me that later. But it seems like the cart's coming before the horse. I don't know if it was a mistake on their part or something that was just ignored. The variance is not going to be voted on until next week, but in the staff report, it states that if the variance for the creek setback is denied, that the lot could be deemed unbuildable, which is implied in the wordage from the attorney, I'm assuming, that the city might be liable for any monetary costs that have been accrued for an unbuildable lot. I don't believe this is true. I think there are some other less intrusive alternatives that could be explored. Christine mentioned rerouting the driveway. Possibility is reducing the size of the house so it better fits. We've lived there for 35 years. I've known that somebody's going to build a house there. We've met with the Shocks before. We've talked about trees in the past. They've allowed us to do pruning so it doesn't impinge on our roof line. I have no problem with the house being built. I've known it was possible for a long time. The size of the house, that was a surprise. Possibly a smaller house would fit better in the limited building envelope. For the 35 years I've looked at that lot and realized with the creek setbacks, the setbacks on the property line, the trees, it's a much smaller envelope than an acre. It's not an acre. How much, I don't know. But the house, as it looks on the plan, takes up almost the whole, the structure takes up almost the whole building envelope. And a smaller home would allow for some adjustments to that setback. One other thought that I had, and I don't know if this is even reasonable, is the city has an ADU requirement for new construction. Is there a possibility of removing that requirement? Removing the ADU, which allows the house to be resituated in a more amenable way to create access and protect the creek.
I think we're past the 3-minute mark. Okay, so if you could wrap up your comments.
Pardon me?
Where you're over your 3 minutes of
Okay.
public comments.
I appreciate
you
your
can
time.
wrap
Thank
it
you.
up. Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other online folks?
Sorry, yes, I do see Stephen and Rose Scotch have their hand raised, so I will call on them. And
Okay, Stephen and Rose, if you'd like to make a comment. you have
Hello.
3 minutes.
Hi.
Go ahead.
My name is Rose Shock. We're going to let Daniel Saladori talk first.
So I think she wants the
Oh,
in-person
okay. So
commentary.
you're going to pass for the moment and we'll have our public comment here in the room. Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Daniel Salvador. Excuse me, my voice is not great. I live at 814 Jewel with my wife, Dale Jewel, same name as the street. And most of the comments today and stuff brought up by the board address issues that I have. The issues that I have basically is that a smaller house would fit on this. This is not unbuildable. It can be done. And if it's done on if the smaller house fits on there, so be it. You'll get the setbacks you need from the creek. You'll get the setbacks you need from the trees. You'll keep the riparian area in very good shape. I have another concern, and that is that recently we had these enormous rains. I observed and took a movie of flooding on my neighbor's property, which is not shown here today for some reason. The flooding on their property right south of this building lot is huge. And it's like a 50-foot water area that is big enough to go over the pipe, that drainage pipe that lies across the creek there, and then into the Shock property. And the Shock property area, unfortunately, the creek bed is very narrow. So you've got this enormous wide flooded area trying to drain into this very narrow area, and the results are not great. So I think that what would be great to do for this area, for the whole area, is to get a hydrology report that would look at the drainage all along this area, with it north of the building site, south of the building site, as it goes to First Street on one end and it goes south on the other to this flooded property that we have. A hydrology report would actually say, well, what do you do about this flooding? How do you make this right through the entire area so that no one area is flooded like crazy and the other area is just basically limping by because the creek is about to overflow? We're going to get bigger rains than we just got. That's what people forecast. We're going to get bigger oceanic currents, the ocean's warming up, more moisture's in the air. This is just the beginning of this stuff. We should take care of it now, before anybody paves anything near the creek and makes stuff worse. We should have a comprehensive strategy on dealing with flooding. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So back to our Zoom guests, Steve and Rose, would you like to make a comment now?
Yes, hi. First of all, I want to thank the members of the Design Review Board for the meeting today. I want to thank Gregory and my father and mother-in-law for being there. So I want to make a comment that in the design of the house, we made every effort to try and preserve the natural settings of the property. We have eliminated 3 highly desirable rooms to make make room for the tree roots, as well as to reduce the overall size of the house. We do have a legal right to build here. And I know that some of the neighbors, they're used to having this beautiful open area to look at for these many years. But the fact is we have owned this property for 20 years. And and Steve is a native Sebastopolian. I grew up in the suburbs of Fremont, so we both came from small towns. And, we're not spring chickens, we're not going to be throwing wild parties. We're in our 60s and we want to retire here. Our families are there. And, as far as we have done things, such as keeping the creek clear professionally. We've hired professionals to come clear the creek so that the water could run smoothly. We did this twice already. Now, with this change in climate, we're not responsible for that. We've done everything we could to make sure that the creek does not flood because we don't want our neighbors to get flooded out. But the fact is, climate change is beyond our control. Okay, you could say that it's an act of God. I don't like to use that term, but we have done everything we can to prevent any sort of flooding. And the fact is that it's a big property. It's like 0.9 acres. It's almost an acre. And then with such a big property, we have a very, very narrow building envelope. And then the requirement to have an ADU built actually reduces what we can do and where we could place our house. So I just want to say that we have done everything we could to try and preserve the natural beauty of the place. And we are still, we're keeping an eye on the flooding situation, but the creek was just cleared recently. So, I mean, I can't stop the rain from falling. Nobody can, right? So the best thing we could do, which is what we have already been doing, is try and keep the creek as clear as possible. And I'm hoping that, we get a decision today because, as Greg has pointed out, this has been going on for 2 years and it's really not fair to us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments from the public or from our Zoom call? Anybody else, Carrie, on the call?
So I do not see anyone else, obviously here in the room or on Zoom. Laura Burke, I believe you already had a chance to speak, and so we do only allow one speaking time. So I apologize for that, but you have had your opportunity. And just to summarize, we did get public comments that have been forwarded from, I believe, Paul, Daniel, and Ken Jacob. Those have been forwarded to the board, including the video, which we were able to post the video on our website, Daniel. We do not have the capabilities with everything else going on with technology, to show that as part of this. And I do want to summarize, as Chair Langberg, you noted in your Zoom script, I believe Paul and Daniel were given the opportunity to speak. Ken Jacobs' comment was related to the variance requirement and the size of the home and the interpretation of M8. And of course, you've all been privy to that, but just if anyone else wants, that comment is in the binder at the back of the room. If anyone wants to view that, it is also posted on our website with all of the other comments. And Chair Langberg, I actually heard about 4 or 5 public questions, if you'd like me to answer those before you.
Public questions?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I think the question that came up a couple of times was the question about what the rule was that was asked part of the subdivision approval. And so I do want to share that with you all, that specific language, just so that there is clarity on that. The 2,400 square feet and the 125 square feet is not in the resolution. What is in the resolution, and I'm putting it up on the screen. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong. As we all know, it's M8. So here it is, and it's specifically the size and height, but the height has always been in line. The size of the homes shall not exceed those of similar homes of more recent construction in the general area. And so that doesn't say anything about exceeding the average size. It says shall not exceed the size of the home. And while M8 is of interpretation is up to the DRB based on the language of M8, I believe we did include in the staff report, and we do know that there is a home on Berryberry Court 1 block away, which is 4,400 square feet and has a 3-car garage. So in terms of this home exceeding it and the letter of this, we believe that the DRB isn't violating the subdivision if you interpret that what is proposed is okay. So I just wanted to be clear on that. And I also want to be clear for the public what the specific language of the subdivision ordinance is. And it shall not exceed the size of similar homes in the neighborhood. And the January discussion of averages and what was to provide the applicants some guidance. The second question I heard was when the planning commission would hear the variance. And that will be on April 11th at 6 p.m. And that will also be in this room. So April 11th, and we just mailed out the correct mailed notices today. I know you all got double for this meeting, which is great. You got a reminder on that. That's a bonus. But the correct variants, but just so you can mark your calendars on that. Additionally, there was a question about the ADU. And what I will note, obviously there were also speakers saying that they signed an agreement, and the agreement at that time was that there would be an ADU. There are two components to this. One is that you as a board under California state law and the Housing Accountability Act cannot condition a project to reduce the density and the number of units. That would be a violation of state law. If the applicant chose to do that on their own because they didn't want to have an ADU, that would require an act of the city council. However, under state law, they would be allowed to build an ADU in the future because you cannot disallow an ADU, even on subdivisions where they were disallowed previously and no one was allowed an ADU, and as part of the HOAs in the state of California, you cannot prohibit an ADU from being built on a single family home property. So if that kind of hopefully clarifies the question. And then I think the last question was actually a question from Member Bush regarding the stormwater. And I do see that the plans show a couple of riprap rocks right now, which are not necessarily appropriate, but there is a condition of approval in the subdivision, which I'm going to try to go to right now if I can find that E22, and I will share it on the screen. And so they will need to include this in their project. These are the two E21, E22, and E23 are the stormwater requirements. Drainage facilities shall be provided to eliminate the effects of stormwater on adjacent properties. That's a general requirement when people are doing development anyway, but it's specific here. Calder Creek shall be protected from water quality impacts due to additional stormwater runoff. Subject to feasibility, drainage shall be filtered by natural vegetation or infiltration prior to entering Calder Creek. And so that, even though not part of the design right now, given this condition, will need to be part of the design development prior to building permit. And that will be reviewed by our city engineer. Additionally, under new regulations, any project that's submitted to the city of Sebastopol is subject to stormwater low impact development standards, which the summary of that is your pre-development impacts in terms of the amount of water, the flow, cannot exceed after development. So you have to have the same flow. You might have a little bit more water, but it needs to, and so it might be a longer flow, but it can't increase the flow that would then cause flooding downstream. And that's a requirement of any project within the city. And then the last one is just that they're subject to any permits that might be necessary. So those are the three stormwater requirements that are conditions of approval already on the project based on the subdivision. And so Board Member Bush, you may have some discussion and some guidance, but just to understand that is covered already in those conditions.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, that's actually a good reminder. Even if this process has seemingly taken a long time, it's not the end of the process by any means. There's our board, now we know the Planning Commission, and then there's just all the documents required for a building permit, which is what the planning director just outlined a little bit. So with that, I think we'll take it back to the board for some discussion and deliberations. That sound good, everybody? Lynn, would you like to start?
Well, I'll just do something. I'll just give a quick overview first, but yes, the house is big. It does feel to me as too big of a house for the property. or for the situation. It's a beautiful lot. I would love to live on that lot, and I don't think it would be good for the community for that beautiful natural property to be built out that densely. And I think the area restrictions as far as the house size are good. I would tend to favor a house 2,400 square feet and no larger, perhaps with another 1,000 square feet of unconditioned space, which essentially is about the size of a large 4-car garage. I have trouble with the look of the house, that it's a very busy design. And if you go up First Street, you see very simple roof lines, for instance, and no houses with all the ins and outs that this house has. It seems like a showpiece house, not part of nature there. And so aesthetically, as an attractive house, I have my concerns, and I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Gary, would you like to continue? Any comments for the board?
Yeah, thanks, Lars. Well, we saw the project in its preliminary phase, and it was still echoing the same comments that I think Lynn just made. It's a large house. It's on a small building envelope. It's a tricky site. Site development is tricky in its own right. It has its limitations, and to again shoehorn a big house on a small lot is difficult to do. And these are the results of the challenges. And these aren't necessarily a reflection of any other person here in this room other than the designer and the allowance of what the program will allow. So to that note, part of it is how do you feasibly manage all these parts that are trying to fit onto a really small site? It comes with careful planning, which I think everyone's tried to significantly do to the best of their ability. We see this process unfolding, and it's also the concern of how it all, with lack of a better term, how it affects everyone downstream. And this is a really important part of who we are as a community. We all share water, right? And water is life, and life supports most of what feeds us. It's important to note that the site planning is something we've all looked at carefully. And my concerns were, again, the stormwater utilities within the setback, or at least the creek setback. We're told today that that's allowed. And beyond the V word, we'll just keep it at that. But again, there's the size and the mass and scale of the home, which is large. I appreciate its reduction in size. I think that there's been some concern on trying to satisfy neighbors. And I think they're also trying to, also pay its homage to its natural surroundings. I would have to say that that's part of the site planning process that we've seen here in this application. Architecturally speaking, I'm comfortable with this style of the home. I think it kind of actually quite marries many of the styles of homes around the neighborhood. So with that note, I'm finding that it does find a sense of consistency. The architectural details are there. The solar requirements, I would love to see how that's, again, there's a tricky again with site planning and what's required from the solar requirements. You put trees in, you want to mitigate stormwater management, you want to give shade, you want to provide privacy to neighbors. It's a delicate balance. I think a lot of that comes down to the last part is landscaping. And again, seeing these conditions that the staff is really well presented on the project in its entirety, it's pretty well addressed. So as a board member, I've had a lot of information. We've been able to dissolve a lot of information. I think there's some impasse here that these plans are trying to present. And I don't think this board's been the holdup. I think what's been the holdup is the idea of, again, the process of really good design trying to fit a really big program on a small site. And this is the absolute result of it. I see it. This is my profession. So again, if there's any consolation to make, it would be a smaller house. You have to give a little to get a lot, especially to get a great neighborhood and a great community. Those are my comments.
That's great. Thank you, Carrie. Melissa?
Thank you. I really sympathize with the applicant on this. You're entitled to build a house, and so we need to find a way to get that done. And I really see that as our obligation, is to find a way through for these folks so that they can come up with something that works. So that's my mode here. I'm a little concerned. You have definitely carved the pumpkin, but we still have a big pumpkin. You've taken out a lot of square footage, mostly interior square footage. You've been really clever around the trees. I really applaud that. I think dealing with the slope, you've done a really lovely job. But as I'm looking at the elevations, set 1 to set 2, I'm not seeing a shift here in terms of the mass of the house. And that still concerns me. I absolutely echo all of Board Member Bush's comments on that front. I would disagree with Board Member Dealer about the change in materiality. Our design guidelines actually request change in plane, change in materials, especially for large structures. So I think actually you've done a really nice job of that, of trying to introduce, some variety of materials, variety of roof lines, and try to de-emphasize the mass of the house. So I definitely applaud that. The use of trellises and other sort of ornamental structures is really nice. It's a really good job. I made a comment earlier just about the materiality, and if we could try to find something that wasn't from New England, that would be great. That would be my ask. It is such an incredibly beautiful natural setting. If there's something that can be inspired by that, I'd love to see that storyline come through in this project. I would agree about the sizing. I think that 3,000 to 3,400 square foot house is a lot of house. I appreciate the ask for larger. I ran through your numbers, Greg. And if we were to take an average of all the data that you provided, it's actually the average of all of those is 2,228 square feet. So the city actually is a little more generous in their numbers. And then if you were to go 125% of that, it'd be just shy of 2,800 square feet. But again, you cast a pretty wide net in terms of size and date of home. So I think keeping it narrow to what the city has identified is probably in the best interest of the project. And then I just noticed that the footprint has not changed from the prior submission. And that's, I think, really speaking to the concern about the mass of the house. Let's go through my other notes. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Christine?
Rose and Steve, I'm glad that you're here on this meeting. I want to, just before I say anything else, I want to take up this letter to the neighbors that you wrote. And in the letter, you state that right from the start, the DRB, they had made up their minds that we are from some .com company coming to take over the town. And I want to assure you that never crossed my mind. And I don't feel that way at all. And I'm sure my board members also don't feel that way at all about you. And, regarding the continuance of the February 23 meeting, you state that all the necessary documents were given to them, the DRB, 5 months ahead of time. No, actually, we got those documents the Thursday evening, February 23rd, before the meeting. So, I just wanted to have the opportunity to really study and think about the whole thing. And there was no intent, as you say here, to delay you. I just want to make sure you understand that. So, in getting back to the structure itself, I feel that it's just really large. If I wouldn't want to be Olson for sure, because they're going to be sitting on their deck and it's 85 feet of asphalt composition roof right in their line of view. So that's a lot. That's huge. And I'm concerned about the creek. And, you know, we're not allowed to talk about the creek setback, but you know, where the drainage goes and how it gets there and what's its impact on the creek. And I went down and looked at the creek yesterday, and I have to say that the creek, the Precious Creek, has been entirely invaded by blackberries. They're just, they're clogging up the water flow. That may be part of the problem with the flooding. Blackberries are a really invasive non-native species here. So, I mean, that could be part of the problem with the flooding, but at any rate, getting back to the house, I think if you look at the P7, I mean, I would like to see a smaller house, definitely. And we had provided guidance, which was the approximately 2,400, 2,500 times 125%. But if you look at the P7 of the agreement for the subdivision, there's a huge opportunity there for you to have your rooms, because it says in here, anybody can use that building. That building doesn't have to be rented out. It just has to be built with a kitchen. And it's required by the subdivision to have the ADU, but it says right here that it can be used by family or any person in the household. So there's an opportunity I can see on this property for 2 modest houses that are in fitting with the neighborhood that could be 100% your use. And with the 1,000 square feet plus the 2,800 square feet, you're at your square footage that you have anyway. So I think it's something to think about. And finally, the orientation, like I said, I wouldn't want to be the Olsons, but if the house roof pitch got oriented the other direction, which nobody would be looking at 85 feet of asphalt composition. I mean, literally, it's right in their view line. I think you would be in a better opportunity to place your solar panels too, because of the orientation of the lot. So I think these are things to think about. And I guess that's what I have to say for now.
Thank you, Christine. I don't have much to add to the discussion at this point. Thanks for all your comments, everyone. I think, well, I guess to echo Chair Bush's, or sorry, Board Member Bush's comments, just the difficulty of the restriction of this site, not just the smaller building envelope, but the slope is hard, and you're trying to put a lot on there. So I think that's just it's a very challenging program to put on this beautiful site. I think, but it does meet a lot of our design guidelines, as the applicant has stated in the report. And so that's great. We have the guidelines there for a reason, and it's working hard to meet those. So the one comment I'll make really is related to the M8 discussion of size is not just about square footage, it's about scale, really, to me. So 20 years ago is a very different world than we live in now. And I think thinking of a size of house for 2 people, friends and family still will come there, I'm sure. It brings up to me this sense of a wise use of resources. Is this really the appropriate size and scale for that tricky site in this day and age that we live? That the sense of appropriate size and scale to me is smaller than what is proposed. So I think that's kind of taking the bigger picture, not just kind of canvassing the neighborhood to see what square footage the buildings are, or if there's a 2 or 3 car garage. But the difference of development 20 years ago to today is kind of where I look at, through the lens I look at this project with. But I think it still meets a lot of our requirements for sure. So we need to consider it from that perspective. So we've all gone through once. I think we're not going to keep deliberating back and forth. In my mind, we've reviewed the project, we've reviewed it more than once. So if there's any other final comments from the board, we can take those and then we should try and come to some decision. Len, you it seemed like you had more to say. From
I
the
do too,
beginning.
so.
Yeah.
I think not just square footage is the concern here, it's the massiveness of this house. It feels more massive than the square footage that you are putting down on paper, but it's got very wide walk around decks on it. It has several very large porches. These porches have like lattice or roofs over them. And the stairways are somewhat grandiose. All these exterior features seem to double the size of the house. And I think that affects us and the neighbors. That's it.
Thank you, Len. Christine, would you have another comment or so?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the difficulties of building out to the building envelope. So for example, on the back side by bedroom 3, you've got a 6-foot retaining wall shown on the building sections. And you're built out to the envelope, and the staff, or somewhere in here, it's talking about you cannot grade in the 20-foot line between the back setback and the property line. But when you build a 6-foot retaining wall, you have to have a layback of 2-to-1 per Cal OSHA standard. So you're really grading back 12 feet. So I mean, and practically, that's what you're doing. And the tree number 5, I'm very concerned about that tree because I went out and looked at it. And while it's 5 to 7 feet from the building, approximately based on scaling the documents and what I determined, the branches are all coming this way over the building. And I don't know what the heights of those branches are, Becky, but I suspect they're going to have to be groomed back.
Well, that's a good segue.
Would you like to comment on that, Becky?
The one person in the room who hasn't had a chance to speak so far.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Our city arborist, Becky.
And the last 2 comments were especially good lead in to some concerns and issues that I have. And I will just speak to the trees and impact of the proposed construction on the trees. And so, yes, it's not just the branches that extend to the east or west, whatever, west. Thank you. It's the trunks of the trees. It is a cluster. It's a multi-trunk tree, and they're pretty good size, and they do extend to the west about 25 feet from the base of that cluster. And so they would extend over the covered patio and to the proposed house. And I really appreciate the effort that's been made by the architect and the designers to respect the root zone of those trees. They've made some concessions by putting in a covered patio and a planter area. But Greg is right. We have, practiced this litany about the trees' roots being in the top 2 feet of all species. And so on the area where there's going to be a retaining wall or a pier and grade beam, or even just the piers, those would have significant impacts on the tree roots. And so I think it would be really imperative to have the project arborist on the site when any excavation is going to be done in there, so that he can determine. He's even said in his report, this is Chip Sanborn, that some of the roots may be so significant that the trees might have to be removed, and that would be determined by him on site at that time. And so sometimes it's helpful to try to prepare ahead for an event like that. And I suggest the dreaded H word, hand digging, sometimes, that you can just actually go out and just dig to the depth of whatever the footing is going to be in that zone, just within the drip line of the tree. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Just to determine the presence of roots and what would have to be cut. And so it makes it a lot more visible and tangible about what the impact might be. The other issue is above ground. We're going to be looking at huge pruning requirements. Actually, not just pruning, there'll be the removal of a couple of trunks of trees just to accommodate the house, because it does arch over, and it's probably from past competition with other trees and other structures that they've grown in that direction, but that's where they are. And so we want to really try to minimize the amount of pruning that has to be done. But as Commissioner Lynn Steedler said, that, you know, those exterior structures, the raised decks and the stairways are definitely within the zone where that's going to be really impacting the structure of those mature trees. So we need to talk about root protection and observation during construction. We need to look a little bit closer at the planning, because if the piers are going to be drilled, for example, the drill bit, the rig for the drilling is equal to or greater than the height of the depth that it's going to be drilling. And so you've got this great big piece of machinery in the bit, usually maybe 18 inches or so up into the trees before it goes down. And so a lot of more sort of care has to be taken ahead of time to determine the clearance for equipment, operation of equipment within those trees, root zones and canopy drip lines and soil compaction. I get wound up. Anyway, I think it's doable. I think that, you know, there's some, you know, really good measures that could be taken to prevent damage to the trees. There will have to be some removals. One tree is not even shown on here that I can figure out. Between the proposed ADU and the covered patio, there's an 18-inch oak, and I can't find the number for that tree. And I didn't think of it in detail enough to try to look for it out on the site again, but I can do that. But that's an 18-inch oak as it's shown on the sheet A2. It fell down. Thank you. Oh, good. I can sleep tonight. Okay, great. Thanks. So that mystery is solved. So anyway, I would just like to know that some more attention is given to any excavation and grading for the retaining wall, the roots, the piers, the overhead pruning that's going to be required in the clearance, and that the project arborist, you know, will be overseeing a lot of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Actually, in the conditions of approval that are presented, we have some of that language already in there. Or much of it. I said the only thing that sort of comes that I don't see would be specifically related to the drill rig, for example, but it does say hand dig. It's sort of like hand dig to start. It sounds like, right, to then.
You're right, but I just wanted to bring it up again.
That's great. Yeah.
And John has incorporated those comments from our previous meetings and site visits into the conditions. So thank you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your thanks for your work and through this process with the applicant and figuring some of this out. Okay, so back to the board. Christine, did you?
Becky, a quick question?
Yes.
Yeah,
please.
so on that tree, you've got, I'm gonna say 50% of the branches are cascading right over to the roof. So if you were to cut those off to build the house, what would be the impact on the tree?
They're not just branches, they're trunks of separate trees growing from the ground. It's a multi-trunk resprouted sort of structure. And so even in Sebastopol's pruning ordinance, we require no more than, 25% maximum pruning of a tree. And so if you've taken off, you know, like this much that overhangs the house, you know, you're taking off probably more like 50% of its live crown. And so the trees actually might need to be removed entirely if they don't have enough photosynthetic abilities remaining to provide food for the tree. So, you know, there will have to be some decisions made once the project is maybe staked. Maybe the project arborist could go out there, look at, are there going to be requirements for story poles?
That's what I was gonna think. I think story poles on this project.
I think it's a great idea. And they could include not just the footprint of the house, but the exterior structures too. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, yeah. please.
Is it your opinion that the tree will survive construction as currently designed?
It's a multi-trunk tree, and so it's a shared root system. So I think at least one trunk is probably going to have to be removed entirely, but it's not going to kill the rest of that cluster. And so I think there's going to be a major impact. When I do inventories, I say no impact, minor, severe. And so this would be a significant impact and needs to be addressed ahead of time. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
Christine, did you have more
No.
comments or, okay. Anybody else? Comments? No? Okay, well, how can let's see if we can determine how to move forward on this. Anybody want to make a motion? Fashion a motion, perhaps? That's the standard protocol anyway, but we can certainly talk a little more if we want, but,
Okay, I'll make a stab at it.
okay.
Because the applicant has expressed that they would like to either, I guess, just approve the project outright or deny.
Christine, can you use your
Oh, I'm
microphone?
Sorry. So, I think the motion on the table right now is to deny the application.
That's not what we asked. But must just be talking about.
Well, I can't, sorry. If it's all right with you, at this point,
You can keep your mic on.
That's what I understood. Okay,
That's okay. I don't think we need to, but your understanding from some comments were that they would like us to make a decision.
right. And I feel I can't make a decision on this project at this point, and especially since we don't know where this variance is going, and we're not allowed to talk about it even.
Okay,
So.
so you're
so,
not going to make, are you going to make a motion or that's just your comment? So we leave it at that?
Well, my understanding, okay, yeah, I'd like to see what other members think about just deny the application and let them move on to appeal. Because
Okay.
that was what this lawyer, the letter from the staff lawyer, not their lawyer, was indicating we didn't make a decision, so they couldn't appeal.
That's true on the discussion we had about the size, that is correct. So that was a non-binding decision, so there was no recourse for appeal. Yes,
Right.
if we
make a
deny
decision-
or approve, there is an appeal process,
Right.
either from the applicant or someone else in the world.
Right.
If we approve it, neighbors could appeal it. If we deny it, applicant could appeal it. That's part of the process, but we first have to come to a motion.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
So it sounds like we know where Christine lands as far as approval or denial.
Well, I'm
If
suggesting.
that's the
yeah,
choice. So, but she's not ready to make a motion, am I right?
Correct, thank
So
you.
maybe someone over here would like to either follow up that discussion or make a motion. She did not make the motion. So you can still discuss or give us your
And
opinion,
I'm willing to come back.
or you can make a motion.
I think they've probably heard all they need to proceed if they want to. And so I'm just going to make a motion that this project is denied.
So I would phrase it, I would like to make a motion to deny the project as
Yeah,
presented.
okay, I make a motion to deny the project as submitted.
That's submitted. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the table. Does anyone want to second that motion? Okay, so we have no second, so the motion dies. I don't know if that's the right term, but motion does
You're
not
correct, the motion
proceed.
fails.
Motion fails. So then, I guess of the other two members, my other two board members here, would you like to make a motion or give your opinion?
Sure, yeah. Again, board member level mentioned that it was either a do or die situation. It was either we're gonna move forward or we're done. So I got the same impression. So therefore, I'm in the same situation as the rest of us here. I think we have a project here, but I think there's some consolation that the board would love to again see. I would love to see our applicants take it back to the table and make it conducive for all of the neighbors. There's a scale and a mass and a size of a home that isn't reflective of the character of the site. And as a board member, it was made clear in our initial preliminary review that the house was too big and it didn't fit. And it's although it's still smaller, again, it doesn't respond to the site. As a site designer or developer, that it would be great to see this project, a project that has merit, go back to the table. And if our chair would allow me to ask the applicant here, if you would like to clarify what you think your clients would like to do.
So before you answer, so I just want to say that
There's no motion.
there's no motion, thank you, but thank you for your comments. And regardless of what we heard from out there, we actually have a third option always.
Yep.
We can approve, we can deny, or we can continue.
There it is.
And I know that some of the people in the room don't want the continuation option just because it feels like it's dragging it out further. It may even include some of the people opposed to the project or who want a project to be different, but it is always one of our options on the board. So just to put that on the record, Gregory, if you'd like to answer Gary's question, if you understood the question. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Yes, thank you. So the question, could you just sort of state it again?
It's already on check, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And again, we've seen your application, we've seen the numbers, and from all the input and feedback we've given, is this simply a dead project, or do we still have a project?
So I think the shade of gray is that there's always conditions of approval. So like planning recommended, and I think that a lot of what the planning report included hasn't really been addressed or talked about much. But I think it's not black and white that we're looking for pass fail, but is there an opportunity, with the entitlements that the clients have and the limitations of the purview of design review board to dictate, where does that begin and end? If there is a offer of conditions for approval, I think that would be open to that.
That's a good response. Thank you. Yeah, that's
thanks.
To go to back to sort of how the process works, right? We can approve or deny and exactly or as written, or we can condition an approval. We can't condition a denial, I suppose, but we can condition an approval. So because the project is not done with its design even, right? When it goes to permit and all the details that have to go into a building permit submittal, designs change, and they have to meet our approval in the intent, but they can continue to evolve. So we as a board can approve with conditions to help shape how that design evolves. So I guess you have another comment there?
I just want to feels important. I just want to make sure the more you were just saying as I walked over here was helpful. In the past, when I was on that side of the table, there were proposed conditions for approval that the applicant in real time here could say, do you accept these conditions? And if the answer is no, then we're not getting approved today. Or if we would accept those, like planning has suggested and recommended from as far as the improvements that were in the current design within the drip line or the setback on the east side, to talk about whether we would accept those types of conditions. That makes sense. Is that part of the process that we have the chance to say we accept going with those conditions?
So my understanding is not really that the process is, we're a small town and we like dialogue, and we're happy to do it. Typically in this kind of process, there isn't that dialogue, but planning director, maybe you can correct me on that.
Sure. So it sounds like there's two things. One, there are proposed conditions.
Right.
And certainly if you have concerns about those, I would have hoped that had been part of your staff report. And I think as staff, we heard that you were okay with those.
Correct.
So that's why we
The
didn't.
already proposed.
The already
conditions.
proposed conditions.
Mhm.
Right.
So the second component of it is that the board, what Chair Langberg is suggesting is that they may be, it sounds like there's a willingness potentially to work through conditions, additional conditions for the project that would allow them to approve it.
Right.
And yes, usually in that, we would ask, I mean,
Yeah.
so there's two ways it can be done. One is the board can just do that approval. And if you don't like it, you can appeal it.
An appeal and approval that we don't like. Okay,
Yes.
that is
Yeah,
a process.
You can
Okay.
do that. And an applicant can appeal their own, the approval for their project because just like they can appeal the denial. And I'm looking at the city manager, the city attorney, just to make sure. But that's my understanding. You can have your project approved. And in fact, we had that happen last year with a special event permit where the applicant did not like and they appealed it to the city council. So, but I do believe if the chair deems appropriate, a dialogue of, is that acceptable? Or,
Okay.
it's ultimately the board's decision.
Right.
But they can allow input from the applicant during that process.
So that, which is fine. I think that we're, as I said, small town, we like dialogue. There's something about that though, too, are we going to go through a checklist? Or start, how about, do I hear 4,000 square feet? Do I hear 3,200 square feet? Like, to go through something like that does not seem very productive. So maybe we can have a discussion. This is probably the next step, is what would conditions be that would satisfy the board? And then maybe we even we sort of talk about that as a group with the applicant, as opposed to just sort of back and forth, one at a time kind of thing.
And
That's
Chair-
what I want to avoid.
And Chair Langberg, our city attorney city manager.
He's got his hand
I'm
up.
not sure which hat it is, but he has
Yes.
some thoughts.
Larry, please.
Well, you could task staff with coming back with proposed conditions of approval and continue it for staff to return if you don't want to go through a dialogue tonight. I mean, staff obviously has heard a lot of comments from the design review board members about their specific issues, and theoretically staff could craft revised conditions of approval to bring back to you if you don't want to go through a dialogue tonight. I can see that it would be rather time consuming to go back and forth with the applicant this evening to go over proposed conditions, especially difficult potentially for the applicant to confer during this process. So that's one option. I mean, there's many options at this moment in front of the design review board. And without going through all the other options you have, that's one thought that occurred to me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That's helpful, Larry. So it seems to me, unless everyone can comment.
I have
that
a
we
comment.
could-
Yeah.
We could discuss potential conditions. And so if we did that, Carrie we have to make a motion first, or do we just discuss potential conditions?
So what I would suggest is that you discuss potential conditions, even if you ultimately ask staff to go back and draft those, because I think at this point I need more input on what exactly you all want to have included. And then, if they're easy conditions, we can take a recess if the applicant needs to consult with the owner and whatnot for 5 minutes or so, or, if it becomes too complicated and you feel like staff needs to go back and, draft those for you, then yes, you would. I would suggest you still get some sense of whether that's acceptable from the applicant. But then you could continue it, and we can certainly continue it to a special meeting date just to make sure that it is done in a timely manner.
Okay. Christine?
Okay, well, I have to go on record saying that having the approval of a variance for the creek setback as a condition of approval is a non-starter for me. I don't think that particular variance, I don't even know what they're offering. I haven't even seen it. I mean, I think there's a proposal for the variance. I got something in email like 3 hours before this meeting, but you know, there's a lot to consider with this creek setback thing. There's, you know, there's agencies, there's, you know, it's a sacred area. There's, you know, possibly a biological report. I mean, when I was down there, I saw where the silting up was happening. And
We're not discussing that.
so, right. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for stopping me. But the thing is there's complications associated with that particular condition that would make me either say denial or continuance, but not approval with conditions.
Well, that condition is going to be on the project regardless of what we say or do.
Correct. We're recommending it, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
And
we
even
know
if
it's
it was
already, it's
not
already
included,
agendized.
even if it was not included in the DRBs, it is required approval. Your approval, they would not be able to submit a building permit until all of their entitlements are done. So they would not be able to submit until such time as a variance is
Yes.
heard by the planning commission.
And so it's.
And I
really-
do want to stress, this is a normal process for the city. We
Yeah.
have done this many times. The planning commission approved several things for the Hotel Sebastopol before city council did final approvals for a zoning amendment and some other items. So this is not an unusual process. I realize board member level may have discomfort with the variance with it, but it is not an unusual process. And all of the conditions related to permitting and creek requirements are already part of the project as they are conditions of approval from the subdivision.
Understood. But
Okay.
what I'm saying is that how this plays out may eventually affect the design of the building, because if it's how it gets approved could affect the building. So cart before the horse.
Right, but we're evaluating the horse that's in front of us. So, any other comments from this side? If we want to, Melissa, you've been spoken a while. If you want to talk about potential conditions or.
I mean, I think we have to give the applicant something to work with here. It's not fair to continue this again. So I would love to have some discussions around mass, size, scale, something that they can work with tactically. Doesn't have the word feeling in it, would be great. So that they've got something they can actually draw to.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. I'd like to see this project built. You know, I think I'm ultimately trying to say that this is a project, but it's not a yes or no answer here, and that's what this board's here for. So again, we're trying to make sure that we're protecting the interest of the larger general neighborhood and the public. That's why this board is here. So I think, again, I'd love to see all the work that the city planning staff has done. We've often on a number of projects have given the staff guidance. That's why we're here, guidelines, and let them work with you, the client, in developing a project that's suitable for everyone. Right? That's suitable for not only the board, for the client, and also the neighborhood. We've seen conditions, we've seen guidelines. If the board right here, there's 5 of us, they can give a little bit more information today for helping this process move forward. That's what I would love to achieve within the next 15 minutes.
And I'm happy to pull up any images that you may need to facilitate.
Carrie, would you put numbers to that recommendation as far as square footages?
I have some here.
So we had a discussion and a recommendation back, in our previous meeting about a square footage for the overall house, so that we can go back to that.
Yeah, it was the P7 2400 plus the 125 square foot. And again, what is that, 2,800 square feet? Is that what it was?
28 even.
28 even, right?
So that would be one. That could be a condition. It's a 2,800 max square foot house. Or is
Of
it
conditioned
that
space.
of conditioned space? Thank you, yeah. So that related to footprint and mass is different, obviously, than just square footage on 2 stories. So are you suggesting 2,800 total conditioned space based on that P7?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, in looking at our applicant, we came up with a number that was even higher than that in our discussion previously, and it was not adhered to. The building came in bigger than that. So without even, if you weren't here, I would think he wouldn't be okay with that one, for example. So Gregory.
And I just wonder too, since that meeting, there were multiple conversations with planning and the city attorney manager. And the numbers used for that and how they were used and the area used for that were not consistent with their interpretations of that. So those, and I requested when I left that meeting, I actually didn't know what was decided or not. I contacted planning. They didn't know what was, they had to rewatch. They had to talk to Chair Luthen at the time and figure out what was decided during that meeting. So what was decided during that meeting was less than clear. And also using information.
So Greg, I apologize, but can you please go up to the microphone? And I did put this slide on that is the summary of the January 5th meeting and what the board determined at that time up for you.
Okay, well, I can't
So
see
we
it
got
here,
we
but
got to 30.
I don't know if
50.
you want me to repeat that or not, but what I said for, I guess, the record is that meeting, the decision there was unclear. I had to follow up with planning. They didn't have an answer. They had to look at the videos and talk to the chair to figure it out. And the numbers of homes used to figure that out were not the same as what was later discussed, and realizing flaws in that, as well as the area used for that as well, not to mention the fact that averages is not part of what M8 says either.
Thank you.
At
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I mean, that's so clearly it's a conundrum in terms of the language of the subdivision. So there's no max, or the language is very vague in a sense, right? It's just, and what they've proposed, we've already said, does not exceed other homes. So they're within their right. And so we're still trying to come up with a better project or a more appropriate project for everyone. But that's still appealable, certainly, or it's still not where it seems like where they want to be. So go ahead, Melissa.
So
Sorry.
I'd also like to put out there that, you've undersized your ADU, you've got 200 more square feet that you can play with in the ADU. Perhaps there is some give and get pull there that instead of being 800 square feet, you go up to the full 1,000 that you're entitled by right to have. And if we can see the main residence get much closer to that 3,050 square foot conditioned space, I sort of feel like those are the boundaries that we can set for them at this point.
Well, what I can see right now is we've got a proposal for just under 4,000 square feet, but we've got 3,000 and 1,000. And you could reduce the massing of the huge building and make it more compatible. 2 buildings, the lot's bigger, they would look like they fit into the neighborhood. It's going to require a redesign.
Which part of the neighborhood? Has anybody done Bayberry Court? It's like 100 yards.
Greg, I'm sorry, but I do have to ask you, if you're going to engage, you need to be called on by the chair, and you would need to go up to the speaker.
So, yeah, I'm talking to,
Yes, to the board.
yeah,
right.
and I think that other problems that are associated with this site is the overbuild out to the building envelope. So if we could reduce the massing, then we could deal with the cutback on the retaining wall into the area we're not supposed to grade. We could deal with the tree issue. And it even says in this P7 that the ADU can be attached. I mean, there's lots of opportunity in that P7 to build out, you know, and if you have, you know, these special rooms that are meditation and stuff, I mean, it would be kind of nice to have them in another building or separate for meditation.
So-
So, I mean, I see an opportunity here. I don't know how to put that into a proposal.
Yeah.
Maybe one of you guys, if you like it, you could think of some language.
I think that, but the challenge is that we've already given direction for a smaller building and it didn't come down to what is now being discussed. So is that just a non-starter? I mean, there's some part of me that says we approve or deny as is. I mean, we can make sort of suggestions, but it's the square footage seems a little bit like a non-starter given what has been presented to us over the course of this project.
It's a hollowed out pumpkin. Yeah.
It's a holiday.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we gave recommendations and they made good efforts to reduce, but they did not get to the suggestion before or what is being said right now. So,
And the mass is unchanged. Just go back and forth. It's basically the same turret aside.
Yeah, that's the issue.
the
Still
math
the mass.
hasn't changed, right?
I mean, it really needs a rethink and a redesign. So now I'm gonna go back to making a motion to just deny.
Would you like to,
Yeah.
would you like to make that a formal
Yeah.
motion?
I'm gonna make a motion to deny the application.
Okay. There's a motion on the table to deny, I guess, once again, to deny the application as submitted. I assume we can repeat ourselves, right?
Yes, you can make as many motions as you want. I
Right.
will note if there is an actual motion on the table. And I'm gonna actually ask our city attorney on this because I'm not used to this. We will need to know from you what the findings for denial are, and staff will need to draft those up. And Larry, maybe I should wait to see if the motion is seconded or not, but there will be some specific instructions on how to do that before you make a final decision.
Does that occur in the discussion then? That seems like that would make sense.
Yes, yeah, we can talk about that in discussion. We'll ask the city attorney to address that.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the table from Christine to deny the application as submitted. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny the application. Let's have any discussion on the motion.
Okay, so if I can start off with the how we would actually do this.
Well, I'd actually like to say something before that. So to me, though I don't agree with the size of the project and it has some issues, it still meets enough of our design guidelines, and whether it's taken them 3 months or 3 years, that I don't think denial is the proper decision. So I can vote on, as we all would on the motion, but as far as my discussion goes, I think that I would hold hope or trust that there's been enough comments to the applicant and the owners that this isn't the right project to get built on site, but it's close enough, so to speak, and it meets enough of the requirements, and the language of the M8 is vague, and it meets the subdivision requirements, and the planning department over here has agreed with a lot of that I don't think that's the proper direction.
Yeah, I'd also agree with that.
So,
I agree as well.
okay, so then we could take a vote and we don't even have to go to what you were just saying. It seems to me, we could vote, we need to vote because we have a
There
motion
is
and
now
second.
a motion on the
So
floor,
I
so there
think
will need to be a vote.
So the protocol, I think actually, and Larry could correct me, the protocol is to vote. If it's denied, then we get to talk about the findings, right? Okay, so then
I have one more comment though. First.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so we can move to a vote on this motion. But is there any other discussion? Christine?
So the intent of the deny is simply to allow the applicant to appeal. When you look at their letters from their attorneys, they're all, what's it called, queued up to do so. I mean, the letter that I got from the attorney gives me the impression that there's no intent whatsoever to reduce the size of the building. So,
Well, and.
I mean, it was
you don't
pretty
need
aggressive.
You don't need your comments.
No.
Now we're in deliberation.
I'm just telling you, the impression that I have from the attorney letter and their input is I don't feel confident that if we go back and say, will you redesign, that we're not just gonna be back here again with the same thing and more attorneys' letters telling us that we're gonna be responsible for paying the money and all this sort of stuff that was in that letter. So this is my feeling about it. I totally agree with you guys that I don't really feel super happy about this deny, because I'd like to see a project. I see lots of opportunities for a really nice project. It's just, I don't know if the will exists. And additionally, it does give the applicant an opportunity to just appeal and they can maybe get everything that they want based on the appeal. So that's my feeling about it.
That's a good comment, though. I would also, you could just turn it the other way and say, if we give them approval, we're doing it with an invitation to design a better project. If we deny, they're either just walking away or they're going through a legal process. To me, that's less productive and optimistic in a way of how this process could go. There are two ways to look at it.
But just to, if they have no intention of reducing the massing, then we're just going to do another round of this.
Yeah, and it's a valid concern, given that they didn't get to the
Right,
square
okay.
footage targets that we recommended. They may never get to that or want to get to that, but we don't know that. Yeah. So we still have a motion on the table. Any other discussion? No?
I think you first stated it quite eloquently that they had their chance kind of thing and it didn't work out. And I just want to repeat what the two of you have just said, that, you know, it seems so much cleaner to get a fresh start rather than trying to put together in detail the number of suggestions that make a good house for this lot.
Okay.
I just would like to echo Gregory's comments about the lack of clarity from the last meeting, because I did watch all those videos and I came away with questions too about like what happened. So I appreciate they've been given an opportunity to resubmit, and you know, we're not able to give a blanket approval on this submission. I want to assume best intent of the applicant to do a really great project. And I think if we can give them some guidelines that would meet approval, I suggest we give them every opportunity to do that without giving their money to lawyers. So I would like to try to come to some meaningful direction for them.
And just one note, if I may, I do want to let our city attorney speak, because he is what I had brought up before about the need for findings. I think we need to hear from him.
Thank you, Larry.
Board members, you will, if you're going to make a motion to deny, and if that motion is supported by the board, then you're going to have to make findings of denial. There are no proposed findings of denial in the staff report. The staff report only contains proposed findings for approval. So the normal procedure would be to take a vote to see if there's sufficient support for a denial, and then continue the matter for staff to come back with proposed findings. An alternative to that, if you wanted to take final action this evening, would be to craft findings now as you sit, and then make a motion with specific findings. You're going to have findings for denial if there's majority support to deny it. If there's not, then the other options are, as we were starting to talk about, is you can task staff from comments made now or more in this meeting to come back with proposed conditions of approval, which are revised, or you can craft your own conditions of approval, which the planning director indicated could be appealed by the applicant. So those are some of the options before you, but if you're going to deny it, you need to adopt findings of denial.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Okay, well, it seems like we should vote on the motion on the table and I think, and come to that place that Larry's saying, that do we even, are we denying it, therefore we figure out why?
You can take a straw vote. Chair, you could take a straw vote. That's what we typically do.
Oh, yeah, right.
At council meetings, you could take a straw vote. If there are votes for denial, then I recommend the board go through
right.
the conditions, the findings that they want to make in support of denial, and then send staff back to draft those.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Straw vote.
And Larry, if they do a straw vote, and which I think they already did preliminarily, and there was not support for the motion, should we then do a formal vote on the motion on the table to deny?
Yes, you might as well show that it's defeated, if
Right.
that's where it's going to go.
Right.
And then you're going to, I think you're faced with the other options I was starting to outline. Either start talking about conditions of approval for the applicant to consider, or give general guidance to staff to come back at a future meeting with revised conditions of approval.
Right.
You need some definition this evening, unless you just choose to continue it.
Okay. So, I mean, how
Is
does
this-
one do a straw vote?
So you can just do a show of hands of
Or related
support.
to the motion? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Right,
then.
so we have a motion on the table to deny the application. Show of hands of who supports that motion. Who would vote yes for that motion is another way to put it.
And this is who
Informally,
would vote to deny the
who would vote
project,
to
which is the
deny
motion on the table.
application. Yes.
Yeah,
So we have a-
I like the idea of staff doing the final summary of our concerns.
Well, I think we're going to be doing that anyway, whether we approve or deny it. There will be
Yeah.
additional conditions if we approve it, or reasons for denial if we deny it, and the staff, we will be relying on staff to help us with that. But
Yeah,
at the moment, we have a motion on the table to deny the application. So I would like a show of hands at this table, who would vote yes to deny the application if it went to a formal vote. So there's, okay, so nobody. So that motion.
So we will
then
go
we should-
ahead.
Now we
sin-
should go ahead
And do the,
do a formal vote on the motion to deny the application as submitted.
Board member level.
I think that means a nay, right? Deny,
Are you in
not
support?
deny. Deny the motion.
Are you in support of
A
the motion to
no
deny the?
vote, a yes vote would be to deny the
That's
project.
a no.
A no would
Yeah.
be to take that motion off the table.
Board member Diegler,
no,
board member Bush,
No.
vice chair Hanley,
Nay.
and chair Langberg.
No.
So that motion fails.
Okay, so we're 0 for 2 so far. Okay, so we've had two motions to deny the application which have not proceeded. So perhaps we could try one that approves the application. And then we could discuss that.
To my fellow constituents, just in efforts to move forward, we've looked at a lot of statistics. We've seen that 125% of P7 at 240 square feet, it's at 3050. I'd like to make that my personal recommendation for the project to move forward. I feel like that's a very good impasse to move this project forward. It allows the client to do what they want. If they do what they will with that information, I think it's hopefully useful information for the clients.
So that's not a motion certainly, but just a, one would be kind of one of the conditions of approval. That's a start of discussion for conditions of approval.
There we go.
How's that?
Uh,
Okay.
Can I ask you to repeat the square footage, and is it for conditioned or unconditioned?
It would be. Yeah, it'd be for conditioned space.
And that number was?
It was 3,050 square feet. Which is 125% of the 240 square feet designed by the P7 ordinance. Or
So the M8 ordinance, P7 is the ADU, but that's okay.
my
That's okay.
apologies.
So this is, and just to clarify, this was the recommendation the board gave to staff and the applicant January 5th, 2022.
Mhm. Okay, so that's, thank you. So that's one potential condition of approval. Does anyone else want to?
I think while we're at it, we should condition we should give a number for the unconditioned space also.
Would you like me to bring up the chart of where the project is at now for everybody?
That would be
Sure.
awesome. Yeah, because in part of the conditions, what I would like to see is a reduction of the massing.
Right, so I think though, this is going to be important because the footprint is only 3343, right? So it's only a little bit more than the condition space we're just talking about. But it's on 2 stories.
Okay, Lars, is that conditioned space? Or
Well,
is that everything like the footprint?
That's unconditioned and conditioned, that's the footprint. 3343 is the current proposed footprint.
So I think one of the things we could possibly discuss is just the 3050 within a certain footprint.
And I will say, there is a note here too, the house that number footprint includes decks and porches.
Right.
So
Footprint,
it's not
so-
just the foundation
so,
house
yeah.
footprint, it's the whole
Right,
build.
but if we
footprint.
conditioned, I'm just bringing a suggestion here to the board. If we were to agree to the 3050, but also condition a footprint for that. So that we can reduce the massing. So some of the conditioned space would then, well, and the footprint in the decks would be upstairs and downstairs.
Mhm. Do you have a proposal of what that might be? Because we kind of have to guess.
So what, and you gave us a size of a garage. They want a 2-car garage with a parking for probably, it looked like a recreational vehicle. What would the square footage be for that?
1288 is an unconditioned space, that's just garage.
The
plus
current
there's-
1288 is the unconditioned space that does include the 3 parking spaces within the garage. And Greg, I don't know if you're able to provide us what the square footage of the garage is total by chance. The other 2 rooms or the other areas that are unconditioned, there is
There's a workshop.
a
storage.
workshop, a storage.
That
Is
looks-
that it?
it
for
looks
the
like it.
unconditioned? A workshop and a workshop and a storage space. Those are the ones that are at the front of the house as well. And then right underneath the entry.
So a typical garage, if you were really generous, would be 24 by 24. There's no dimensions on here that allow you to know what anything is, are limited.
Yeah,
And then you've got
good.
the garage in the back. So what would a 3-car garage square footage be?
Um,
$864 plus the workshop, which is 16 by 16.
You know, I'd suggest a 1,000 square foot maximum, which is the equivalent of a large 4-car garage. And how that is used would be up to them.
Mhm. So approximately, or let's say 30, 50 unconditioned, 1,000, sorry, conditioned and 1,000 unconditioned.
Unconditioned,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, these guys are doing some math, which I'm very appreciative of. Lynn, you also mentioned the mass related to all the porches and trellises and so on. Is there any condition that could be given to that, those kind of elements, do you think? Or
You know, it'd be very hard to condition that because, you know, it's the balcony's very wide, the decks outside are very large, the stairs, and these are all separate things. And so
yeah.
I'd say just cut that mass in half.
Well, you have like when we're talking about the great wall of asphalt, which is the 85 feet, that included covered porch. So, you know, some of that could be conditioned too. So you just don't have this long expanse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like 1,000 square feet. That's reasonable.
And now we're sort of close to almost 4,000 conditioned and 1,288 unconditioned. So that's what's proposed now. So if we would, the unconditioned space would shrink a little from what they proposed, but the conditioned space would shrink greatly.
So what's the number for the conditioned space currently?
Currently, it's 3977.
Yeah, that sounds way too high to me.
Mhm.
Well, what we gave guidelines for was 3,050 in our January 22 meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to see it go down to like 2,800.
But we did in January of 2020, we did, you know, vote for this number. So I think we have to stick with this number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Well, with your suggestion about including the ADU, they seem like they have a lot of space to take care of all their needs.
well, the ADU covers up, it makes up that difference, you know, for their other use that they wanted.
Yeah, but it's still getting kind of big.
But it makes two separate buildings. There's some bulk downgrade.
No, it's a good idea. I just still seems a little big.
Well, they have to build the ADU anyway,
Yeah.
but they don't have to rent it out. They can use it for their own purposes. It just has to have a kitchen, however you define that.
Mm-hmm.
An under counter refrigerator and a countertop burner,
Well,
but not gas, no gas.
But then they have guest bedrooms and a big living room to turn into whatever they want. I think.
Well, there's nothing defining the design of the ADU. It just has to have a kitchen. It could be one big
Yeah.
room.
So I think that.
It gives them 4,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Well-
so Melissa or Carrie, you guys were crunching some numbers. Do you have any other thoughts about these numbers that are being bandied about?
No.
Okay. Carrie,
So we said the condition space would be 30-50. With the idea about the.
can you get your mic there? So,
Sorry, yeah. We looked at conditioned space as the recommended 3,050 square feet. With unconditioned space at 1,000 square feet.
okay. So maybe before we go into any further discussion of other conditions or whatever, we should put that to our applicant and just see if that's a sort of a no-go or please, yes.
And then I'll just say that the math on garages 1 and 2, workshop and storage, total square footage is 1,098 square feet.
as currently.
as currently
submitted.
designed, yeah.
So there's another,
That's, yeah, 1,100-ish of
so
unconditional.
there's another 200 somewhere in this project, according to the number.
Yeah, I don't know if they're counting the hall or
Right.
what
Okay.
they're
well,
doing
that's-
there, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think?
So I think in the context of, I think actually, Carrie, you said something something a minute ago about what the design review board's purpose is. I think you mentioned what was the phrase? Something about the best interest or protecting public interests. Is that fair? Is that something to that degree? And this does relate to the question at hand. And I think that is actually really important to this comment and the way you guys are, what you're deciding on, is what's left out of that is the rights of the property owner. And I think that is really imbalanced and inappropriate. So what I can tell you right now is, and I'm happy to speak with the clients, but I don't understand or see any reasoning behind this. So I kind of like it like this. And so for that, there's no way that we would accept that. I haven't heard anything justifiable or acceptance of the fact that the data there's more data since that meeting. A lot has gone on last year that nothing is being talked about in this consideration. You're going back a year. So all the work we've been doing and all the meetings with planning and city attorney isn't even part of your conversation, which tells me that my clients just spent tens of thousands of dollars for nothing if they're not even considering the new information. That was probably more than you were looking for, Lars, but thank you.
Not at all, but I think the very salient thing that has happened in the year is that the design of the building didn't change much.
It did.
It reduced in some square footage. The mass of the building didn't change much.
Right.
So that is a very important point that it seems like
so
you're not addressing in a way. You're just using data to back up. You're using data the way you want to, which is how we all use data to get to justify the design you come up with.
But also your data actually goes against you, because if you take the average of your data.
Average.
Yeah.
Point average. Average has no place in this conversation.
No. This is a legal argument that belongs between the lawyers.
Yeah.
If we deny, then you can go have that argument.
If with the direction you guys are going, that's exactly what's going to be happening. And
Because I mean, I would disagree with her interpretation, but I'm not going to get into her letter. I marked it up. But you know, that's a discussion not for a design review board, but for
but
attorneys.
you're making decisions. So it's
We're
they're
not
not separate. Oh,
We're not
I'm
lawyers.
well aware that we had to
Excuse me.
hire.
Gregory, you addressed me, okay? You addressed me.
Sure.
And you asked me about where we're getting these numbers. They were they were clear through this process what the numbers are. And I have 5 of your neighbors, of your clients' neighbors who came down, take their time here to express their concern. And the one unifying concern is the size of the structure, not the fact that they don't want them as neighbors, not the fact that they don't love the project. It's the size of the project. We're listening to the people at large.
Sure.
That's the comment here.
Sure.
If you can't take that information back and make a better project out of it for the best of everyone's best interest, then that's your decision.
So long
We're trying to
as it's
help you.
in balance with the
This is-
client's rights as a property owner, though, which I'm not hearing
So,
any
and
of.
If I may,
You may.
I think, and I'm guessing our city attorney may be at the point where, if we're getting into a property rights discussion that isn't the purview of the DRB, Larry, I'm wondering if you can help provide some guidance on the legal aspects of what the DRB should be doing given this conversation.
At this point, it sounds like the applicant is already telling you that your potential conditions of approval, which you were previously discussing a few minutes ago, are not going to be acceptable. So I would think at this point, you would be back to having a motion which would direct staff to prepare findings of denial and return to either the next meeting or a special meeting with the findings of denial for you to hold a formal vote to deny the project.
And Larry, I guess the other possibility that I think of is to go ahead and approve the project with these conditions.
Yes.
In
yeah,
which
you
case
can do
the
that.
applicant could appeal that. But there would be an
Yes.
approval for them to at least take some time to think about if they wish.
Yes, I don't know that you're ready with them all written out this evening, so the board knows exactly what it's voting on. Either way is a path to an appeal, yes.
That's what it sounds like, but there's always, I'm the ever optimist. If we approve it with even this one condition, it gives an avenue of non-appeal, but just redesign to make a better project.
Yes,
Even
you
if,
could
even
vote
if
to-
Gregory wants to shake his head anytime I open my mouth or whatever, then, but there is that possibility, both to the designer and to the owners, to just take our approval and our conditions and work with that.
If it is as simple as changing the square footage of the conditioned and unconditioned space, I think staff could craft revised conditions of approval for this evening. You could vote to approve that. If the applicant does not wish to accept it, they could appeal.
Okay, so I think given all of that was just said, we could do a third try on the denial. And probably, I guess, pass it this time, or we could do what I was suggesting and just go the other way and approve it with that condition, which I think we're all in agreement in terms of square footage.
If you vote to deny this evening, you're going to have findings for denial. You have no
Right.
findings in the staff report.
Yeah, I hear that, Larry. Thank you. I'm just proposing the other option. And so maybe,
I think we're in agreement on the other option.
I think so too.
Yeah.
okay, so let's then, before we, do we want to, are there any other conditions that we would want to entertain, or it's really just that?
So where we were at before this interruption was just discussing the bulk. So we've got 3,000 square feet of conditioned space.
30-50.
30-50, right? Yeah. And so do we want to discuss limiting the footprint within that? Like right now we have a building that has living space upstairs and downstairs. So that's definitely, you could reduce the bulk of the building by having the upstairs and downstairs. It's already kind of pre-designed to have sort of an upper and under the whole thing. And if we reduce the footprint, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Well,
So I think I think that should be part of the conditions.
Okay, and Lynn, you said earlier, you didn't agree, you said give them 30, 50 and 1,000 and let them do what they want. But now are we suggesting that it's within 2 stories it is, or Gary, do you have a comment?
No, I don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to place any further conditions on
Mhm.
this. other
Okay.
than It's 30, 50, and even maybe 1,100 for the garage. We kind of calculated up. That's
Okay.
the consolation there. So I think it seems like a good way for a possible redesign.
Okay.
May I ask one additional question, which would be, I believe, Vice Chair Hanley, suggested earlier that the ADU could go up to 1,000 square feet. So that would be something I'd ask the board to give us direction on. And the other is, I'm not sure if I heard you also say they could, and how the board would feel about, because it does go to massing again, of if it remains detached at 1,000 square feet versus if they wanted to attach it to the house.
And Carrie, I think the 1,000
that
goes
is,
without saying, right? The 1,000 goes without.
yeah,
saying.
that is correct. They could do that. Yes.
So I would like
And
to
it's
see
not
2
actually
different
part of
buildings.
our.
You're right. It's not a part of
application
your
or
packet. So that is,
so
Yeah.
because of
right.
state law, it
It's
is
up to
allowed.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think we go there. And Melissa, were you like to say something else, or?
I'm pushing hard for this motion for approval with the
Okay,
condition.
why don't,
Then if they want to appeal it, they can tell the city council
Well,
can't live in 4,000 square feet.
why don't you actually formalize that motion?
All right, I'm happy to. do it.
I didn't hear your number.
Okay, yes,
I would like to make a motion for approval with the condition that the project be resubmitted with conditioned space not in excess of 3,050 square feet and unconditioned space not in excess of 1,100 square feet.
I second that.
Okay, so just one clarification. You said the project is resubmitted. It's not actually, are we asking for it to come here? No, that's a continuation, I think.
I think it's
So-
a continuation. It comes here.
Well, because if it's not, if it's just an approval with a condition, then the
Okay.
staff can take it from there.
Correct.
Right.
And then, right, and then unless the design through its permit process comes back radically different, it might come back to us, but that's not actual the step.
Right,
that should take.
and what we normally do as staff on that is we can certainly, and we do often, as you know, Chair Lambert, consult the chair if there's a
Right.
question that we have about it.
Right, yeah.
I
So,
think we also have to add in that condition, the result of the variance discussion in case they change something. So condition number 3,
Oh, just the statement that the approval would not be valid unless a variance is approved by the planning commission. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, please do add that,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
for clarification.
yeah, okay.
I will amend my motion to include the condition that the variance needs to be approved. Got that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it will, may I read the actual language that we
please,
like?
yeah.
Okay, that this approval shall not be valid unless and until the variance is approved by the planning commission.
Sounds like something to say.
And the term resubmitted would be struck from the motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Christine did second it. Any further discussion before we take a vote? Lynn?
I'd like to just round it down a little bit to 1,000 and 3,000 square feet. It's creeping up and it's still pretty big.
That's not the instruction they were given, though. I mean, I think we have to be consistent here and,
Yeah.
you know, this board, before you and I joined, made some instructions and came to some determinations. I think we have to honor what the board did.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, okay, thanks, Lynn. Any other discussion? No? Okay, let me call a vote.
Sorry, was there a second?
Yes.
Christine.
Thank you,
seconded. Yes.
Christine.
Board Member Lovell,
Yes.
Board Member Dietler,
Yes,
Board Member Bush. Aye. Vice Chair Hanley
Aye.
and Chair Lingberg.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously 5-0.
Okay, and I will note that I'm just going to read it down here. So any appeals may be filed of official actions upon the process for that is to file an appeal form and payment of applicable fees to the planning department. Any appeals must be filed within 7 days of the actions, and any appeals would be heard by the city council.
All right, well, that's our one agenda item. Thank you, everyone, for your input. Thank you, everyone from the public, and Gregory, thank you for your participation. So our only other agenda item is subcommittee updates, which we just pass on that one.
You can pass on that one, and there is also, I believe you skipped the planning department update.
Oh,
But we can be pretty
we
quick on that.
skipped that earlier. My apologies. My gosh, we do need
I
that.
quickly have to ask my
We need-
usual questions on planning department updates. So what is the status of Woodmark? And what is the status of the hotel?
Sure. Happy to provide that. The hotel is the same. They have pulled their building permits. They have also now submitted their encroachment permit to Caltrans, so they're working through all the frontage details. That's a pretty big deal. And if I could, I apologize, we still have a meeting going on. Could you all
Excuse
adjourn to
me,
the
members
lobby?
in the public. Excuse me, people in the public.
We still have a meeting. going on.
Yeah, so if you want to continue, you can talk out there, or you can pay attention to the very important announcement.
This is important.
Okay, so the Hotel Sebastopol, they have pulled their permits. They have submitted from the city. They are pending some federal approval of their archaeology work. which I guess has been delayed, but they are hoping for it soon. The building department issued an extension based on that, it's not any fault of their own. And that's pretty standard, and given the weather,
Excuse me,
Ladies-
people.
ladies.
Can you go outside, please, or participate in the meeting here? Thanks.
So we anticipate they'll start construction soon. That will be archaeology work will be done first, and then hopefully sometime this summer on the construction. Woodmark, we actually just approved their final document yesterday, which was their tree protection plan. Urban Forestry Associate Ben Anderson, who I think you've seen, I don't know if you've seen from time to time here or not, but they were the arborist on that project, and we just had a meeting last week regarding corrections to the tree protection plan, and they have now made those. So their permits are ready to issue as soon as they get those documents to the building department, basically, and pay their fees. They anticipate starting construction in mid to late April, weather dependent. The planning, building, and engineering department will be having a pre-construction meeting with them out on the site before that to make sure that all the tree protection, erosion control, all that kind of stuff is in order. They are doing that in a phased approach. And so the first phase will be 48 units. And it'll basically be the front driveways and sidewalks and buildings and the central community building. They'll be doing the other 36 units, which is 2 or 3 buildings, which are the rear buildings, and then the rear part of the parking lot or drive aisle and parking at that time. Is there another project?
So is it pretty much the project we saw? Is Woodmark the project we saw that came to us, more or less?
Yes, that's the one that you had the couple of preliminary.
No, I know which one you're talking about. I'm saying the design is
The design is generally the
Yeah,
same. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, of the revised, where they had
Yeah.
taken the grading down significantly and the retaining walls changed. Yes.
Got it.
It was not to its maximum density.
That is correct. It was not to its maximum density. It was a couple of units less than what was required. They did go through the SB 35 process.
Right.
And they met all the standards except for, I think the only density bonus that we did ask them to submit, which they did, was to overhang the parking, into the landscaping. And that is actually something in our code that required design review board approval. But they were able to deal with that. And so we were like, I don't have the discretion at the staff level, but they could submit it through and it was quite reasonable. It was, what you would often approve for projects. So it was pretty standard in that way. The other modification that they did make on it, if you recall, they do share a driveway with Bear Meadows next door. And so there is a couple things on that. They actually, they had originally had a stop sign for the Bear Meadows coming out of the development. On our request, they did actually change it to be the Woodmark folks stopping and the Bear Meadows just not having to stop. And obviously they need to keep it clear and uncongested, but that was a concession that we were happy that they made to ease that. The city is also installing, and they'll be responsible for a portion of a pedestrian crossing with the rapid flashing beacon across Bodega on the west side of Robinson Road. And so there'll be a significant pedestrian improvement. And I believe that is starting, I forget when, but it's starting soon. That's being done by the engineering department. Any other
Thanks.
project updates? It's like my whole last 2 weeks there. I do know that they've been very working with us quite well on the construction management plan as well, and their truck routes to avoid going through downtown or past Libby Park where they can. They're taking a right out, and I kind of told them, taking left on Bodega. You don't want to be doing that with a grading truck if you don't have to. Anyway, if you're going to Bodine's, you're going north of town, and so they would be taking Ragal up to Mill Station Light, and that's kind of best for, obviously they'll be on Ragal, but that is an arterial still, so it's appropriate.
So it's all Modine?
I don't know. They have 2 or 3 different places where they might be doing things, but that if they're going north of town, that's one. I think the only time they would be going left, is if they are going directly into Santa Rosa or south. So, yeah. So, but anything north, they won't be going around the plaza and that kind of stuff. They'll just be heading out to the right, to the west.
Great. All right. And in terms of subcommittees, where we have the objective design standards is moving along and yes, exactly.
Yes, yes, no, John and I did,
I don't know what's happening. We just got an email.
we are having meetings every 2 weeks with the consultant team to work through. We're almost to the point, so there's a couple of things on that one. The existing conditions report is available. Now that you're done with this, if you'd like to go look at it, we did present it to the planning commission a couple of weeks ago. That is really just the existing conditions, the framework for moving forward in terms of what we have, but what we want. And so now they're starting to work on draft standards for us. And we're working on scheduling meetings in April for the committee to review that. And then additionally, the design guidelines subcommittee did help us input on the city's parklet guidelines. And that will be going to city council next Tuesday, the 21st.
Sorry, the design, those parklet guidelines are going to the city council?
Yes,
Oh, they're not coming back to our committee.
they're not, no.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah. Lost the vote for the San Francisco one.
Yeah.
I did talk to them about putting links and whatnot into that. So that information and whatnot would be available.
Yeah, yeah, maybe we can talk about this at our committee when we have the objective design standards, because from our opinion, I think our experience and Paul's, that consultant and that process and that presentation were not that great. So I'll just put that out there now. We could talk about it more at the committee, but.
So Robin. Is Robin still the head of the carpet committee at San Francisco?
We didn't deal with San
So, and
Francisco, we
I'm
dealt
going
with
to ask that
Sonoma,
we, given the
which was
time, and John and I need to get ready for planning commission.
boring and stupid, so to speak.
Their meeting's at 7. So, yeah, so
Okay,
just in
okay.
deference to our next meeting, I think I'll leave
Oh,
any
there's-
further updates.
Yeah,
for
okay,
next time.
great. All right, thank you. And with that, I'll pound my gavel and adjourn
Yeah,
the
you're-
meeting.
Job, Lars.